on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and after an 0-5 start to the season, the Demon Juggernaut rolls on with 5 wins from the last 6 games, and D's fans are now daring to dream again. Joining me tonight to dissect a clinical win at the MCG over the Swans is George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Midman. Good evening to all our listeners. And I'll just remind all our listeners that since Angry Andy gave the team a rev up, we've won 5 of our past 6 games. So is Andy still angry?
Well, a little bit. I thought we should have won by more. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. No, I'm not angry. I'm actually quite happy. And also joining us tonight is Mr. I Told You So. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, the Demonland Massive. You've gone from basically wanting to have nothing to do with the football club.
No.
6 weeks later, it's a juggernaut. That's quite some turnaround, Andy. And I don't know that I can really claim
true.
Told You So. I think that was also the nadir of my season so far. I wasn't ready to jump off the bandwagon quite already, but I was disappointed in my lack of ability to see the bright future that was suddenly looming ahead of us.
Well,
it was a fantastic win. I enjoyed myself immensely at the footy. Had a great day. It was just awesome. So it was, I think, our most dynamic performance since 21 in terms of, right from the get-go, we looked absolutely switched on. And I think the Swans were too. And we'll unpack that a little bit. It wasn't, for me, a case of, they didn't turn up to play, as we'll talk about in a little bit with the pressure ratings. But I just thought we were awesome. It was so exciting, and it's pretty fun to watch us rattle on 130-odd points, isn't it? It was awesome.
look, I'll just say I wasn't ready to have nothing to do with the club. That was a passionate plea. That was a passionate plea that I didn't want us going 0-10 into the season. We were looking not great, and all right, maybe I didn't keep the faith, but I was never going to jump ship, never would jump ship. I would have jumped ship a long time ago if that was the case.
Yeah, and it was probably very justified given that it was after the Essendon game, if I remember. And if you saw Essendon play on the weekend.
Yep. Well, there's a couple of wins we've left on the table, and maybe there are reasons to it, but there's nothing we can do about it now. We've just got to.
Well, I was equally angry, so it feels like a long time ago, doesn't it? Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of talk about faith and keeping the faith, and when you're following a footy team, and big week for teams. I've adopted the Spurs, and so it's a big week for the Spurs as well. And
did you just adopt them, or you've been on them for a while?
since Ange started coaching them? So I thought it was typical to adopt a team that's so Spursy, as they're called. It's like could be just put Deasy in there. But I was saying before we came on, I watched the game from down in the left forward pocket, 1 row back from the fence, which is the first time I think since 1981 when I went to the grand final as a kid that I've been so close, and it's a completely different way of watching the footy. Like I've been to VFL games and been that close, but it's remarkable to see. I mean, it's hard to see the game. I don't like that aspect of it. I went with a mate whose son was having his 9th birthday. Came with his mates. So shout out to the Eggman and his good mate Luca. Egon, whose birthday it was, Big D's fan, was quoting stats at me. So I love that. That's the future. And then at the end of the game, I just got a photo earlier today of Egon getting a footy from Claz, who came and gave him a little red footy. So awesome day for him, awesome day for the Ds. And the atmosphere down there is quite something, I have to say. And I also wanted to give a shout out while I'm giving shout outs. Shout out to the cheer squad. It's the first time I've been anywhere near them I've never been near them, basically. And they were awesome. The energy's just fantastic. And I was inspired by the vitriol they were pouring on the umpire for that. What looked to me, I was sort of behind it. One of those snaps, one of the goals they were given, maybe it was Laddams, I can't remember, went directly over the top of the post. I don't know. Do you remember that one?
Are you talking about the one early on where they called it on the full
end?
Yeah, they called. No, okay, then that was.
Hunt Road end. They called it a goal, and from where I was sitting, it looked like it had gone directly over the top of the post, so it should have been called a point. And that seemed to be the advice the cheer squad members were giving the goal umpire for about 5 minutes too. So yeah, it was really terrific fun, and a real different atmosphere down there, that close to the game, and incredible. Some of the contact, some of the strength of the players is remarkable.
Your little friend Egon wasn't named after Egon Spengler from the Ghostbusters, was he?
I don't know. I'll have to check that out.
Harold Ramis's character. All right, I digress.
But he's a mighty D. He loves it, and I have to admit that it's not really my style. But I was giving it pretty harshly to Nick Blakey, and I thought I was being quite funny. But I don't think he would have thinking it was that funny. But the people around me seemed to, so that was all that matters, really.
Well, if the MCG ground staff are looking for someone, just point them in your direction. All right, let's get into the reviews each week. I invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast, to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and truly appreciate that feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we do give a shout out to those who do take the time to share their reviews. And Sarah the Jackal writes, as someone who's followed footy casually for years but never quite grasped all the tactics and nuance, the Dreamland podcast has been an absolute game changer. Andy, George and B-Man break things down in a way that's easy to understand without dumbing it down. And I've learned so much about structures, game plans, and even things like list management that I'd never properly appreciated before. What I love most is how interactive it is. They read out the questions from the fans on the forum and actually respond thoughtfully. It really feels like we're all part of the same red and blue community, contributing to the conversation together. It's not just a podcast, it's a place where we all feel heard. Massive thanks to the team for making me love the game even more. Keep up the great work, legends. Go D's. Well, thanks, Sarah. A lovely review. And keep that feedback coming. Simply leave a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcast, and we do give you that shout out on the show like we did for Sarah. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you want to leave feedback and ask a question, share a comment for the show, you can do so under our weekly podcast post or slide into our DMs. You can download and listen to the Dreamland podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or any of your favourite podcasting apps. And in addition, come and watch us and listen to us on YouTube. Just search for Dreamland Podcast to find our channel and subscribe. And if you want to connect with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world, head on over to our forum at demonland.com. You can sign up, join in the conversation. In addition to being able to post questions and comments for the show, as we've got coming up, you'll find endless discussions on all things Melbourne Demons. And if you are listening live, head on over and you want to head on over to our chat room. You can talk to us, you can listen and join in live, listen, talk to us in real time. But we've also got, that's how you can call into the show. And I've set it up there. So if you go to demonland.com, you're listening live, you'll find a link to be able to connect to us and ask a question or if you want to.
Andy, on that, just you've got to sort out the ability to leave a message so Rosestar doesn't have to type his comments.
Yes, I saw that. I saw Rosestar. I did see that. I'm in the process of doing that. I've just been very busy.
Can you read them out as Rosestar? Can you read that message as Rosestar?
Probably with AI these days, you could probably feed in all the voice messages that he sent in, and we could simulate his voice without him having to call in.
But not probably. You 100% could.
Yeah, it's very frightening. Someone might be taking our voices right now and doing something, but I don't recommend that. Okay. All right. We do go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. I'm going to go straight into the match overview. In front of 38,520 fans of the MCG, the Demons produced their most complete performance of the season, overpowering a Sydney team by 53 points in a demolition. Melbourne's 0-5 start to the season may just be ancient history, and finals may no longer be a far-fetched fantasy. With 5 wins from the last 6 games, the D's are firmly back in the mix, just 1 game outside the 8 and playing like a team with purpose. At the centre of it all was Kozzy Pickett, who delivered one of the most electrifying individual performances of the season and arguably his career. Wearing an Indigenous Guernsey designed by his father and playing with evident pride, Pickett torched the Swans with 5 goals, 24 disposals, 6 clearances, 4 tackles, 13 score involvements, and a team-high 536 metres gained. And I did actually read that only 4... I'm going to pull this up. 4 players in the last 20 years. I read out. Champion data shows that since score involvements started in 2003, only 4 players have had 24 or more disposals, 6 or more clearances, 13 or more score involvements, and 5 or more goals. And that's Jason Ackermanis in 2015, Patrick Dangerfield in 2014, and Matthew Pavlich in 2010, and Kozzy Pickett on Sunday. So well done, Kozzy Pickett. He's in some good company.
Amazing game. Just an amazing game of footy.
Yeah. He was everywhere, bursting through centre clearances, evading defenders with his signature agility and creating havoc inside 50. His third quarter was especially lethal, where he added 3 goals to effectively break Sydney's back. Post-match, Pickett admitted he had goosebumps walking off to a standing ovation, cradling his daughter in one arm while absorbing the adoration of the Demons faithful. While Pickett was the standout, the Demons' dominance was built on a ferocious two-way running and defensive intent across the ground. Melbourne smashed the Swans in contested possessions and locked them down in transition, forcing repeated turnovers and capitalising ruthlessly. Well, not all the time. Could have capitalised more. Clayton Oliver produced his best performance of the season with 31 disposals, 12 tackles and a vital goal. He was a relentless presence around the contest. That goal, an intercept and composed finish in the final quarter was met with an outpouring of emotion from teammates and fans alike. After a tough couple of years, the moment was as symbolic as it was celebratory. Max Gawn again imposed himself, finishing with 21 touches, 17 contested, 35 hitouts, 9 tackles and a goal. His work at stoppages gave Melbourne midfielders first use and set the tone for their ascendancy. Christian Petrarca celebrated his 200th game in style, adding 28 disposals and a goal. His powerful burst from centre contest proving pivotal in turning territory into scoring opportunities. And the often overlooked Christian Salem played a critical role off half-back, providing clean ball use and structure behind the footy. His rare goal, just his 8th in 7 years in the third term, helped extend the margin and deflate any lingering Swans hope. 10 individual goal kickers reflected the evenness of Melbourne's forward threat in addition to Pickett's 5. Jake Milcom continued his fine form with 3 majors. Tom Sparrow and Harry Sharp each slotted 2. Bailey Fritsch, Max Gawn, Petrarca, Salem, Harry Petty and Oliver all hit the scoreboard. Though their 19-17 scoreline could have been more emphatic, and they hit the post 3 or 4 times and kicked 5 out on the full, remarkably. The ability to consistently generate looks inside 50 was a clear sign of the system working. Melbourne's resurgent, culminating in back-to-back wins over 2024's grand finalists Brisbane and Sydney, now positions them as one of the form sides of the competition. And after a horror start, Simon Goodwin's side has rediscovered the identity that made them a September 4th force in recent seasons. Excuse me. Sorry, I had to cough. Suffocating pressure, clearance dominance, forward half territory, and electric forward talent. With emerging contributors like Xavier Lindsay, Harvey Langford, Aidan Johnson and Jake Bowie playing roles, and stars like Gawn, Oliver, Petrarca and Pickett finding form in recent weeks, Melbourne's momentum is undeniable. As Kozzy Pickett said post-game, referencing last year's finalist Hawthorn, who rose from a similar mid-season standings, why not us? Big man, why not us when you go into your stats files?
Why not us indeed, Andy? Why not us indeed? And jumping into the player ratings for the game, just a reminder last week. So I think it's pretty. You could make a case that this is the best 2 back-to-back wins we've had. I don't know since when. Since at least I don't know, it feels like since our premiership year. In some respects, like such a fantastic performance last week, and I think this week was a better performance, a more well-rounded performance, and just the way that you could just tell right from the get-go the energy was at a level where they were on the back foot, and we sort of knocked them off their sort of axis a little bit, and they never recovered. And even when they came at us, it wasn't like that feeling of, oh no, we're in a bit of bother here. It just never felt like that at the ground. Where, of course, it was frustrating not being further ahead. So 2 huge wins back-to-back, beating the 2 teams that played off for last year's grand final. It's got a nice synergy to it. I just wanted to remind listeners, last week I noted that that the win was based on the work done by, at the heart of it, by our senior players. So last week our 5 highest rated players were Trent Rivers, Clayton Oliver, Christian Petrarca, Max Gawn and Jakey Melksham. This week, and I asked last week, do you think Trent Rivers is a senior player? Is Kozzy a senior player, George, Andy?
He should be, but he's a little bit younger than the rest of them.
He's a little bit younger. It's remarkable to think, though. So he started, his first season was 21, so it feels like he's been around a lot longer. Anyway, our top 6 players this week. So our last week was Rivers, Oliver, Track, Gorney and Melksham. This week, Kozzy, unsurprisingly, was our highest rated player, 21.2. Track, another terrific game, 16.9. He was 17.2 last week. Clayton Oliver, brilliant. He was 20.5 last week. He backed it up with 16.3. Just a terrific performance. Set the tone right from the get-go. His season high tackles coming into this game were 9. He took 7. He made 7 tackles in the first quarter alone. Really, really set the tone for the match. And just, by the way, that was one of the most absolutely most incredible moment. I've seen a lot of games at the MCG, but the crowd reaction after he kicked a goal, it was amazing, wasn't it? It was 35,000 fans there. It felt like there were 100,000 all cheering Clary. Wasn't it something? Like it just gave me tingles. It was amazing. Clayton Oliver, he's second. Trent Rivers again, he was in our top 4, 15.8, backing it up after his huge week. Maxi Gawn, 14.8, and Jakey Melksham again. So really, and then Ed Langdon. Really just wanted to reinforce the point that 2 weeks in a row, maybe taking Kozzy out of the senior players category, 2 weeks in a row, just phenomenal performance from our senior players, from our best players, not just our senior players, our best players. Track, Clary and Maxi Gawn, just awesome. And I'm really enjoying Trent Rivers and his, how he's playing at the moment and his trajectory. And just to highlight, how well those players playing, and the coaches vote, Kozzy got 10, Clayton Oliver got 7, Salem got 6, which is interesting, and he wasn't in that top 6. But obviously the coaches really liked what he brought to the table. Track had 4, Maxi Gawn, just 2 coaches vote this week, and Eddie Langdon. Isn't it just incredible? One of the things I found amazing was watching Ed Langdon run in this game. He was just everywhere. His running was just off the charts.
Can we just talk, because there was a question about it, but I didn't end up including it, I don't think, about Langdon and where his positioning was. He was starting at centre-half forward almost every centre bounce. Did you notice that?
I saw that question actually, and I was thinking about it, and it's one of the... it's just one of my huge bugbears. One at the ground, you can't see anything, particularly when you're sitting on the bench.
Where you were sitting.
But even on the television, why don't they at least put a little icon, at the start of each bounce, put a graphic up that shows where people are at their starting position? It would be interesting. They do it in other sports. They do it in cricket for fields. They do it in soccer to see the starting lineup. I don't know why they don't do it. Well, I do know why, because they're bloody hopeless and they've got to do
you got to sort of get it out there quickly.
Hardly matters, but I think it's a function of 2 things. One, remember that Langdon was going to play midfield, so he's not playing midfield. They want him around the ball. They need his running power. Essentially, I would say that the answer to that question is that he's another high half forward. He's backfilling a little bit of the running power we've lost with Nibbler not being in the team, sort of the arc-to-arc running power. And they obviously like using Langdon and
Langford
Lindsay on the,
and Lindsay
and Langford and Lindsay on the wings.
and Chandler as well. He's playing the wing too.
Yeah, well, he's
sort of
playing high half
swapping.
forward
Yeah.
wing, and
Yeah.
so I would see his role almost like the classic utility back in the day when you'd get your footy card and it'd say utility on it or ruck rover. He's just, but it's his running power, and instead of running along the wings, he's running sort of arc to arc, but more through the corridor. His running was it's just something to watch live, and how often he's kicking inboard to that sort of right angle kick inside. It seems to be his go-to kick. Impressive performance from him. In terms of good, well, you can't get much better than this if you like the sugar hit from scoring. Though how frustrating was that first half of the inaccuracy? It was like, Andy, I can see you've had a haircut, but good. That might have been a result.
I pulled
of that
it out.
quarter.
I pulled it out at the game.
Yeah, we had 42 shots on goal, the most for the D's since round 8, 2018 versus Gold Coast. I'll repeat that. That's the most shots on goal we've had since round 8, 2018 versus Gold Coast. Really, I want to flag the best thing, really, was our transition. So there's stats that measure transition or break it down a little bit. Transition stats measure how often chains of disposals result in a score or an inside 50. Chains include all kick-in chains, all clearances and intercepts with at least one disposal in the chain. For the first time all season, I'm 100% confident of this without going back and looking at the numbers. We were in the positive for all of the key stats. So chain to score percentage, which is proportion of all chains that resulted in a score. 30% of our chain resulted in a score. Only 15.5 of theirs did, so plus 14.5%. Defensive 50 to forward 50 was 25% to 21. So defensive 50 to forward 50 is proportion of all chains starting in the defensive 50 that result in the inside 50. We did that 25% of the time, which is impressive, plus 3.3. Remembering they were a side that were regarded very highly for their transition last year, but they're struggling this season mid-table. Better than us, though, I have to say, up until the last 4 or 5 weeks. Over the arc of the season, they're probably a little bit in front of us, but not much anymore. Defensive 50 to scoring percentage 12.5 to 4.3, which says two things. One, it's better by us in terms of the amount of scoring we're doing from our back half, but they only scored 4.3% of the time from their back half. I thought defensively, really that was the story, and it was interesting. I heard Track interviewed directly after the game, and he was asked about our offense, and he answered by, well, I actually think it's our defense. Everything comes from the defense, which is interesting on a day that, as I said, that we had the most shots on goal for 7 years, and his mind went straight to how effective our defence was. And I think that the fact that they could only score from their back half in chains 4.3% of the time it really reinforces how effective our defensive structure was. Defensive half to forward 50%, 35 to 24. That is defined as proportion of all chains starting in the defensive half that resulted in inside 50. We were plus 11.2 for that, and defensive half to score 16.1%. So that's pretty good, better than our season average of 13. But they only scored 7.6% of the time in chains from their back half. So we really plus 8.6%. We really smashed them in that half. That was reflected in our season average for points from defensive half is a pretty lowly 26.4, but we scored 40 points in this match from our defensive half. Our season average against, we've been giving up 40 points from 40.1 points per game from our defensive half, from the opponent's defensive. No, from our defensive half. In this match, we only gave up 25, and I reckon, we're guessing, I don't know, but I'd reckon 18 of those points of those 25 points were in the last quarter. But before that, we did a brilliant job of stifling their movement. And that was something you could see from down low about how hard they worked to cover off and to block up and create congestion ahead of the ball. They were really in two minds. It really felt like, back in the day in 21 when we were playing our best footy, our most stifling footy, that sort of sense of players looking up the field and being confused about what to do next. Seems like that happened to the Swans a few times, even though it was much more widely spread. It wasn't that wall that Melbourne were putting up in 21. So our transition footy was the best that we've done all season, no doubt about that. That's what we want to do. That's the game that we want to get to. But, of course, we also smashed them in the contest. 190 pressure rating across the game. We laid 89 tackles. They laid 82. So what's that, 170... 181 tackles for the match. Huge. We had 20 tackles inside 50, 11 more than the Swans, so another huge number there. And it was great to see, wasn't it, that Fritter was amongst it with the tackles. I thought his game was excellent. His energy was excellent. Ditto for Kozzy, obviously, up forward. But Melksham, his pressure was fantastic. The team pressure was fascinating. This is really reinforces. So, I think you can take off the table the idea that the Swans didn't come to play. First quarter, their team pressure across that first quarter was 216. 200 is considered super elite in terms of tackling pressure. We were 204. They more than matched us, 216. So we're minus 12. They also beat us in the second quarter, 176 to 170, minus 6 in that quarter. And we came out after halftime, and this is what was super impressive. It came out after halftime in that third quarter. We screwed it down hard, and we were 200 of their 182 plus 18. They couldn't go with us. We upped our rating, and that was the game, really. Then the last quarter, though, I was super impressed also that the Swans didn't throw in the towel. Their pressure rating was 190 to our 185 in the last quarter, minus 5. Remarkably, the pressure rating was bang on 190, both teams. So it really showed that the Swans never sort of threw in the towel. They worked right to the line. If you look at, say, for instance, even the Brisbane game, but the Freo game, the pressure differential was massive in those games. Contested possession, as you mentioned, Andy, we're plus 27 for contested possession, plus 18 for ground ball gets. We were plus 16 for post-ground ball gets. We just really wanted the ball. But this one was a really standout number in terms of the contest. For post-clearance contested possession, as I said, it's an important data point for most coaches. When we were playing our best footy, for context on post-clearance, during 21 to, say, 23, which was when we were playing our most, when we were winning more games than, than we have for decades, really. That was our one-wood post-clearance possession. The best we had between 21 and 25, and thanks to Willow for these numbers, was plus 36 in round 5 against the Hawks, and that just really shows how we played. We've had 23 times. We've had plus 23 on 11 occasions. We've had more than plus 23 on 11 times. On 11 times since 21, most of them being in 21, 22 and 23. But we were really down on this number last year. I suspect that, we barely won that more than a handful of times last year until the last 4 or 5 games when we upped our pressure rating. But we're getting back there, and at the same time, we're also improving our transition game, and that's a really good pointer to what Goody's trying to do, combining those two methods, if you like, the transition footy, but intense pressure. Pressure wins games of football. So plus 23 was an amazing performance, 90 to 67. Tackles inside 50, I mentioned, we were plus 11. The pressure and the contest fueled our intercept game. We had 73 intercepts to their 54, plus 19 for intercepts, and we turned that into really our major score source and arguably what won us the game. 12, 10, 82 points to 7, 5, 47, plus 35 for scores from turnover. So that's where that pressure and territory and inside 50 and that intensity, that really manifested in our scores from turnover. A lot of that was their kicking, but I'd argue that it wasn't that they weren't on. We just, as I said before, we just really knocked them off their axis right from the get-go, and they looked rattled, to be honest. And we really turned that into a big scoring source. 82 is huge, massive. That's a massive score from scores from turnover. Middling, no bad tonight. Middling was interesting. I thought our clearance numbers, it felt like we dominated clearances, but we didn't actually. The total clearance numbers, just the raw totals, were 43 to 42, so only +1. We were -4 from centre clearances in terms of total numbers. We had +5 from stoppage clearances. They had first possession 2 more times than us. And the scoring from that were only +12 from scores from stoppages. So Grundy and their midfield did a brilliant job. Grundy's he's a really, really excellent ruckman, and he works super hard. Maxi had a good game, but you can't sort of underestimate how good Grundy was. But yeah, that was interesting given how well, like listening to the radio afterwards, they were all talking about how well our stoppage was, but they're not very, we've had much better numbers in our other wins, much better in terms of the differential at least. Curious, applying, of course it was frustrating in that first half, I should say, missing so many set shots and gettable goals. But being more positive about it and applying a glass half full philosophy to our accuracy. Here's some positive, affirmative facts for us to digest. Sure, our kicking for goal was woeful in the first half, 6 goals, 11, but it was exceptional in the second half. We kicked 13-6 in the second half, which is just brilliant. Our expected score was 120.5, but our actual score was 131. Impressive by any measure. So, in fact, our kicking was excellent in this game. Of that, I reckon Kozzy could claim most of his, bumped up that above our expected score. So some of his goals were amazing. In the first 6 or 7 games in 2023, you might remember our accuracy was off the charts. We were number 1 in the AFL, wasn't sustainable, and our actual score was often better than the expected score in that block of time. However, since then, it's been super rare that our expected score, our actual score has been better than our expected score until this season. So it's happened 3 times so far this year. That's a huge improvement over the last 2/3 of 23 and all of 24. We were +4.1 against Freo, our actual score to expected score, 1.8 against the Eagles, and now 10.5 against the Swans, and we were bang on in our loss. Bang on even in our loss to the Cats. So we played 11 games and matched or exceeded our expected score in 36.36% of our matches, which is not too shabby. So perhaps our kicking is not as bad as what everyone is saying it is. Maxi the Warrior, this was really curious. It appears he doesn't need much of a chop out. In a must-win big game, not to mention super long, a 40-minute last quarter, meaning lots of centre bounces, of course, 33 centre bounces. There were 122 ruck contests, and Maxi took 108 of them, 85%. That's nuts. AJ only went to 6 of 35 centre bounces, so he wasn't really super involved as a ruckman. Contrast that to the Swans, who also have a gun number 1 ruck, obviously in Grundy. He had 95 contests, but Peter Adams had 27. So I thought that was really curious.
Just to add to that about Max and the ruck contest, they were all pretty physical as well, like body on body. Grundy likes to play him really close. Not just the boundary throw-ins, the centre bounces as well.
So Grundy didn't do, fortunately. I don't know whether Maxi worked out a way to avoid it, but remember in our opening round game against him last year, he was just smashing him into him. So, but he's a good ruckman and he looked in good nick. I thought that, but nonetheless, I thought that was curious. That's a lot of rucking, isn't it, for the big fella? Another super impressive game, of course. So, and as he mentioned, one of my other curious stats, he mentioned this, only 4 players have had 24 or more disposals, 6 more clearances, 13 or more score involvements, and 5 more goals since 2023. Ackermanis in 2015, Dangerfield in 2014, Matthew Pavlich in 2010, and Pickett on Sunday.
It's on mute then. Doug Reamer in the chat room said, if we have the ball and are attacking more, like in the second and fourth, Isn't our pressure naturally going to drop because we have possession?
No, not necessarily. Like, I mean, if you had 100% of the possession, it would, but we didn't. Like, possession was about 50-50 or 50. So it's so statistically, you would have to, for it to be statistically meaningful for your possession not to drop off. When you play keepings off, sure. But when we corral, like if they play keepings off and chip it around, you get pressure points for corralling. So if you get up in their face the way we were doing it, that's exactly what we were doing. That's why they couldn't transition the footy. That counts as pressure stats. So they were doing it to us as well. So no, basically, like unless it was a completely open game where they weren't going near each other, which it wasn't, like you can see from those pressure numbers. If you have a game like that where it's really open and it's being moved around, like the Dogs game that we were talking about last week, that's when you get low pressure numbers because you're getting fewer contests. But as I said, what was 170 odd tackles. It was a super high pressure game, the only time those pressure numbers drop are when you really, really spread and no players come at the opponent. Every time Melbourne player rushes up to the mark to stop someone playing on, that's pressure points. Anytime a Melbourne player chases a player who takes off after receiving the handball, that's pressure points. The biggest pressure point you get is when you actually lay a tackle, but there's multiple ways that they accrue pressure. So no is the short answer.
Well, there you go, Doug. Let's get into our listener questions. Spirited Norm Smith asks, are we back? There were really positive signs. Tracks burst in energy. Clary's 31 possessions, 12 tackles. Gawn dominated again. Backline well balanced. Pressure was immense. Kozzy was electric. Go Lordy says, what does it mean if we beat the winner of last year's grand final in round 10 and the other grand finalist in round 11? And D-Rev says, I may be biased from watching the Casey game as well, but we need to consider how poor the Swans were in assessing where we are at. They made so many unforced errors, I thought they might be playing a different sport. I know you can only beat the team that you play against, but I don't think it's time to take the lid off. So, George, are we back? Is the lid off, or should we temper our excitement?
I think there are a lot of things came into this game. I think the first thing is we really got the Swans at the right time. They were really poor. They're poor from a manning perspective. They were missing 8 of their first 22 players in this game. They were missing Amati, Goulden, Melican, Papley, McInerney, Francis, Logan McDonald and Cunningham. The other thing that happened during the game, most people didn't notice it, was that Heaney obviously did a groin about just before halftime and was permanently stationed as far as I can see in the forward line from there on in. So they really only had 2 good midfielders in this game. Heaney was one and Warner was the other, and all of a sudden you've only got one decent midfielder left. So they really couldn't put their best team on the ground by any stretch. So that was the first thing. The second thing was
the other thing is the coach.
I was just about to say the coach. Sorry, Dean Cox is no
Max Gawn. Yeah,
no. He is no John Longmire by any stretch of the imagination. The most stupid thing that I saw in this game was about 5 minutes before the end when it was a centre bounce. Hamling, for their side, went to the very extremity of... He was playing winger. He went to the extremity of the box so that he could run into the back line to create the extra man. And that's something you do when you're 1 or 2 points up to stop the opposition getting in, not when you're 10 goals down. And you sort of go, what in the hell are they doing in the box for that? But anyhow, so yeah, Sydney are not what they were. I think them getting to the grand final last year was a bit miraculous, and subsequently they've been just an ordinary side all round. The other thing from our perspective, let's look at what we're doing. I think a number of our movers and shakers are starting to find their best individual form. It's very difficult to understand where Petrarca's coming from after this time last year. He had a really, really serious injury. It's difficult for people who haven't suffered serious injuries how long it takes them to get back from it. He's starting to now play the Christian Petrarca that we know so well. He's got more confidence. He's got around ball handling in particular. He's just playing such a more dynamic role than what he was even earlier in this year. So we're seeing a progression in him. Clayton Oliver is exactly the same. He's come off a very limited preseason, a very disappointing last year after injury and all sorts of things. All of a sudden, you're starting to see the best out of Clayton Oliver again. Kozzy turns on these absolutely blinders of games, absolutely blinders.
One of the best games of footy you're ever going to see.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about him a bit later. But all of a sudden, you're getting your quality players playing that much better overall output. Is the easiest way to put it. So that's the best thing that we're seeing with us. The other thing that I think is starting to happen is, for example, the two players that we bought in this year, in Langford and Lindsay in particular, they're playing as much game time as any of the other seniors players in the side. I was astounded when I saw the Langford time on ground, for example. These guys are playing. They've only played half a season so far,
and they're just as effective.
And it's their first season, and they're playing. Normally your first year player, you expect them to see in and out of the side or limited game time till they get it. These guys are playing the same as our senior players.
And George, the thing that strikes me about both of them, and I have to say I just love Lindsay, but the thing I like that's amazing about both of them is that already after 11 games, they both look like they've been there forever. And you sort of like have this feeling watching them that they're reliable. Like you go, oh, good, I'm glad Lindsay's got it.
Absolutely.
I'm glad Langford's got it. It's like when, I didn't even think that about Track in his first, well, he got injured, but like Clary for sure.
Yeah.
Like that was like probably the only comparison to both of those two players in my time following footy is Clas. In his first season, it was so, it looked like he'd been playing AFL footy forever. And it's the same with those two lads. It's just terrific.
Yeah. The other thing that I think has happened now that we've had 5 wins out of the past 6 is enthusiasm. This has brought that youth and enthusiasm story back to the fore. I spoke briefly about it last week. When you've got AJ playing in the side, as we've seen, all of a sudden things start to happen, and you've got these young players like Turner in the back line is another good example. Utterly dependable when absolutely needed, and these are the young players that are bringing this enthusiasm into the side. And I don't think we have a chance to give a shout out to a few others during this session tonight, but Jake Bowie has just absolutely turned it on this year. If he's not either first or second in the Bluey for this year, I'd be utterly amazed, because he has gone up another level by a long stretch. He is just magnificent in the back line, and his ability to read the play and just do sensible things at the right time. So overall, things are definitely on the up. We're seeing, like I said, mainly the progression of our younger ones coming in who are now reliable. We're seeing our more senior players putting in a better performance as they come back from long-term injuries. So we certainly got the Swans at the right time, but we've got to take the credit as well.
Big man, before you go on, just about Jake Bowie, I heard on the radio they mentioned that he was tagged by James Jordan at one point. Is that I didn't see
first
the replay.
Half, but, first half of the game, Jordan picked him up apparently, and only picked that up on the replay. Yeah. By the way, you wouldn't have wanted to watch that game live except at the ground. Dermot Brereton was off his chops, and it was like, what? I couldn't wait. Anyway,
he's on Fox, yeah.
He's on Fox.
So they mentioned I saw a clip of BT today saying that he turned to the Fox box, which is next to the Channel 7 box, and there was no one in it. So the Fox studios were not there. That is ridiculous. I can understand not going interstate, but to not go 2 minutes down the road or wherever they are is ridiculous and a disgrace.
And it's funny, but I didn't know that till afterwards, and because I saw the report about BT's comments, which was good, a good sledge, I reckon, particularly because they've taken the Saturday night games, which is just such a boneheaded decision.
And are they doing Saturday night at the studio and not at the game?
Surely not. But
surely
not. But it's funny because I only heard that afterwards. But when I came home and watched the replay, I couldn't believe that they didn't comment on the crowd's reaction or make more of it when Clary came off. Because at the ground,
you couldn't feel it on TV. You could if you knew about it, like when
if you were there at the ground hearing it.
No, well, I know, but I'm saying if you saw it, like when I watched the replay on Facebook today, I saw it a couple of times because I was there. You could tell, but if you were just watching it, you probably couldn't.
Point. If you weren't in South Melbourne and calling it from South Melbourne and you're in at the MCG, it would have been the first thing you said. It was amazing. It was incredible, the reaction. The love was just, it was love.
The smile on his face was just,
just priceless, wasn't it? Just priceless. And just want to say that, great summary, George. And, I've talked obviously a lot about fitness and whatever and that stuff, but the number one thing in football, the number one determinant of a team's chances of winning a flag is injuries. And it just drives me nuts how little, the whole soldier out, soldier in rubbish that infests football and the coverage of it and the whole way we talk about it is just ridiculous. It doesn't happen in the NBA. It doesn't happen in the NFL. If you lose your starting quarterback in the NFL, everyone knows you're toast. It just drives me nuts and the Swans are the perfect example. At this stage last year, they hadn't lost a game. They had not lost a game, and that was because they had a absolutely injury-free list. They didn't have a single player at this point last year who wasn't available for selection. And this year, George went through all of the key players they've got out. It was 6 or 7, George, 8 best 22.
Yeah. Eight out of their best 22.
So I don't care what effort you saw, what effort they brought. They brought effort. Pressure rating is they're solid numbers, as good as any other team has brought to the table for us all year. But you take 6 or 7 of your best 22 out, you're going to struggle. The same goes for us last year when we're having these conversations where Melbourne were at last year at this time last year. And I think one player above all has really hurt them because their transition game is all over the shop, is Goulden. Yeah, Goulden was the player who was so critical to their ball movement. And as George noted last week, the one that was almost as critical because Goulden freed him up and they got run was Blakely. I mean, he looks a shadow of him, the sort of player he was. But part of that's to do with not having the players like Goulden feeding the ball with those really aggressive kicks. So it is just such a massive factor. That doesn't take away from our performance one little bit. It's a bit like we'll talk about the Casey game later. Yeah, Preston, were a poor team, but it doesn't matter. When you bring what we want to see is effort and willingness to work hard and to play the game plan that we want to do, and we did those in spades, which is why we flogged them. I put a post on Demonland before the game that I don't back Melbourne games, but if I was going to, I'd be all over that one because we started. I knew we'd come in, but when I posted it, that we were 2-10 outsiders. They were favourite. Didn't make any sense at all. We'd won 5 of our last 6 or 4 of our last 5. They'd lost 3 of their last 5. But number one is, as George said, they have got 6 or 7 of their best 22 out. It's just. I couldn't believe the odds. They were so out of whack, and I predicted a 32-point win, and I was only halfway wrong.
Let's get into the next one. Go Lordy asks, are the Swans loading? Were both teams knackered in an almost equal last quarter, 10 scores to 8? And MPC says, usually at this time of year, the NAM rounds, we seem to be very sluggish and play some of our worst football for the year. This year, it seems to be the opposite. We have run out games so strongly the past 2 weeks. Do you think the high-performance team have changed their approach to when our loading phase is? Perhaps we loaded up earlier this year with a view to gradually gain momentum throughout the whole season, similar to what the Lions did last year. Monocular says, our final quarters, which were nightmares earlier in the season, have been fantastic in recent weeks. Is this stark contrast also linked to our training and conditioning? Leave It to Diva says, credit to our fitness staff at the club for turning things around with our stamina. not least of all for Clary. We are finishing games so much more strongly now. And a shout out to the team for putting the foot down on the accelerator in the last quarter and show some genuine desire to bury a team. To be man, this question's right up your alley. Last week I gave it to George. He objected, so throwing it back to you. So what do you attribute this incredible turnaround in our ability to run our games to?
Well, I wouldn't say incredible ability, but the working through the questions, are the Swans loading? No. And we were both teams knackered and almost equal last quarter. No. The pressure rating, what did I say it was? It was, let's have a look. It was 185, 180, something in the last quarter. Have a quick, talk amongst yourself. It was 185 to 190. So they were 190. If contrast that to Brisbane, who I think were loading, they were 155 in the last quarter. No way were either team. They were both cherry ripe for this game. D's were, Swans were. We talked about this earlier in the season. I posited that there's a chance that we're doing exactly what MPC suggests, that, they're exactly right. Our pattern over the last, since Burgess came on, was to be cherry ripe for round one and take that through for the first 6, 7, 8 games of the season. It worked brilliantly in 22. We were 10 zip or something in 22. It worked brilliantly in 23. Not so well last year, except still that first 6 or 7 games was by far our best win-loss ratio for the season. So it's clear for the last few seasons, at least since Burgess has been on board in 20, that we've aimed to peak, to be cherry ripe round one, and then, using a metaphor or analogy of a car running out of fuel come buy period, which has been the period of time, as MPC suggests, where we've really struggled around the buy period, where Freo have got us on the outside, where Collingwood have run over the top of us, where we go down to bloody Cardinia Park and they do a number on us. That's been the pattern. I absolutely now think, based on the evidence of what we've seen, that that's exactly right, that MP suggests, that we're rejigging our program, our high-performance program, to peak. I think there's 2 peaks really, or 2 or 3 peaks during the season, to build the peak around into the buy period and then use our buy, which I don't think, we've got 3 more weeks to the buy, is that right? I think, or 2 or 3 more weeks.
St Kilda, King's birthday, and then I think the buy.
Then the buy, right. So I think that we're redoing it. We've, exactly as MPC suggests, we've changed our approach to when the loading phase is. We've loaded up earlier this year with a view to gradually gaining momentum through to this middle stage to avoid some of the losses we were getting, but at the risk of the losses that we had, and it's a calculated gamble. So I really think that's exactly what we're doing. So I agree with Leave It to Diva. Credit to our fitness staff for getting us where we are. The other thing that's really important to note, and we talked about the importance of injury, is that we've had a really good run with soft tissue injuries. We've had injuries, but they've all been contact injuries, haven't they? And there's been Marty Hoare was contact injured. Maybe he had a calf or something, but it's been a real theme from Burgess and into Selwyn Griffith, is that we've done great for our lack of soft tissue injuries. And I forget which club I heard the other day. Is it the Blues? Someone has just had a nightmare run with, one of the clubs has had a nightmare run. Maybe it's Essendon with soft tissue injuries. Just on that, I just want to talk about that impact of loading. And did you end up being able to clip up those?
Yep.
So the second one, the ABC radio one, just to set this up. So I got you to clip, Andy, to clip this up for this question, just to talk about the impact of in-season high-performance program and increasing loads. And the context is it's an interview with Nick Dacos, who, as much as I hate Collingwood, this young man continues to impress me. He's one of the best footballers I've ever seen. Ultra professional. He had a really, really interrupted preseason. So, yeah, I think plantar fascia or definitely some foot problems. He had a really disrupted, particularly before Christmas, couldn't do any running before Christmas. So he's for an elite runner. His whole program has been disrupted, and Cameron Ling, and it's great. They're starting to, I'm really pleased in the media. They're starting to be a little bit of discussion about fitness and high performance programs. It's starting to seep through the AFL banning of such conversations, which is a conversation for another day. But yes, if you could play that clip, Andy, that would be great. It's Cameron Ling talking to Nick Dacos.
Just quickly, we don't have to discuss it, but do you think it's the AFL not wanting to discuss it, or the clubs not wanting to give away their IP or their?
My personal opinion,
yeah,
I think it's the AFL largely driving it. Of course, the clubs don't want to, but the clubs, if there's conversations there, they can't stop. They don't care. I mean, all the clubs would know where the other clubs are at.
Yeah.
And just on that, like on the, as I said, I didn't have much doubt that the Lions were loading. And so much was my confidence that I smashed them on the punt because I knew they would come out and be completely wound up and ready to go against the Hawks. And they were. They completely obliterated the Hawks. So I think it's the AFL. I don't think they like the idea that there's some games can be that like a team can't be at their very best, and okay. I actually think there's an element there of their collusion with gambling companies, because if you know when a team is in a heavy loading phase, then you're going to do what I did on the weekend and smash the Lions, because it makes total sense. It's similarly with where we're at. If you think, as I've been saying, that we're improving in our last quarter for the last 2 or 3 weeks, bringing that knowledge into betting in that Swans game gives you a leg up. So I think it's the AFL. They've got no interest in having it out there. It's part of their lack of analysis of the whole game. It drives me nuts.
The Sports Better on the line. They want to chat with you.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go from the ABC.
Nick, I'm interested with, obviously I love the midfield side of the game out of everything, but your running and your running capacity and your ability to cover the ground, it simply looks incredible when we're sitting up here in the commentary box. What about week to week, though, now in season? Are you still looking to make fitness gains, i.e. get fitter with your endurance, or is it just purely recovery-based now and you've simply got to get your body right to front up?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because it's been sort of a battle for me. I had a little bit of a reduced pre-season and I've been sort of using the last couple of weeks to try and get some fitness blocks in, try and get some running in during the week. Worked with my head SNC at the club on a little plan just to keep improving my fitness. I think there's plenty of room for improvement in that area of my game still. But as you said, it's sort of been tough. I've pulled up pretty sore the last couple of weeks. So it's a battle with trying to improve in season and just making sure you get there on game day ready to play. But it's sort of something that we'll do going forward, depending upon how I pull up, just trying to keep getting some fitness in during the week, making sure we're ready for the weekend.
I thought that was fascinating. One, I was really pleased to hear that sort of open, smart conversation about fitness. But if you think of Clary had, maybe not the best preseason, his best preseason for a while, better than the previous one at least, obviously. But, that whole idea that he's had to try and get fitter during the season and the impact of that it's really difficult to do so. So when he talks about extra running, he's talking about loading. That's what he's talking about there. And that they're trying to do as much as they can to increase his fitness in season, but that's really difficult to do. And I think Clary, we're seeing some improvements in that space in season. So he's probably doing some additional work. Why that's important, if you aggregate that over an entire team, and you get a team doing an extra block of training, is exactly as Nick Dacos just says. It makes it really hard to, as Cameron Ling he went on to suggest after you stopped it, Cameron Ling goes on to suggest, well, it makes it really hard to get up on game day if you're doing extra loading, which is why if you've got 23 players who come out to play a game of footy who have all done a heavy block of training, it's just not possible for them to perform at their optimal. Collingwood, by the way, a remarkable fit team, and they've pushed through it, obviously, and so is Nick Dacos. But I just thought that was really interesting snippet of a longer interview.
Scroll writes, who said we can't kick a winning high score? Can you imagine what the scoreboard would have looked like if we'd kicked straight? Set shot goal kicking is a massive problem at the club. Just look at the scoreline in the Casey game. Throughout the match, I always thought we were well in control, but when you fail to convert your opportunities like we did in the second quarter with 23 forward entries to 5 and only kicking 3 goals, 8 to 2 goals straight, you leave the door ajar for the opposition. We kicked the first after half-time, but they then kicked 2 and then missed the next 2. If they had kicked those 2, it's game on. We have to put teams to the sword. All's well that ends well, but that should have been an 80-point plus drubbing. Monocular says, goal conversion is still disappointing, though 4 posters and a couple have touched on the lines. Unfortunate. George, accuracy in front of goal, it's not going away.
No, it's not, unfortunately, and the difference, or the real concern still for me is the set shot kicking. It's not so much in play. It's just the set shot stuff that really upsets me, particularly when there are people who've got... Max was just horrible yet again with his set shot kicking. What do you do with a guy who will not take a shot from 15 metres out on a slight angle?
Weren't we calling for someone to run past him the other week? I take that back. That was hot.
Yeah,
That was terrible.
Can I just interject there for a sec, George? The funny thing at the footy, as I said, I think it was just so exciting to being at a 9-year-old's birthday party and the cheer squad screaming and people yelling. I was more vocal than I normally am. And when he had that, I screamed out as loud as I could, Maxie, give it off. And literally 5 seconds later, Ray gives it off to Melksham. I couldn't believe it. Maxie, I was joking, mate. Come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And then he didn't even make the distance, for God's sake.
No, but 15 metres out. What do you do? We've got coaches who are supposed to be kicking coaches and things like that. His technique is horrible. There is no other way to describe it.
That was a very short 50, I have to say.
But that was the worst 50, and then they gave the Swans a really bad 50 as well. That was short. Yeah.
Anyhow, back to the goal kicking. Yeah, I thought it was telling. When Clayton Oliver from 50 is able to make the distance, maybe, and the accuracy, and half a dozen others in the side can't. Clayton isn't the world's best kick by any stretch, but he made it quite easily. And so, I don't know what to do. The good thing is, as Andy was saying earlier on, in that second quarter where we absolutely let, what was it, 3 goals, 8 in the second quarter. That was just awful.
Dominating.
After absolutely dominating every aspect in that quarter, they were within 3 goals.
Including, it was back, time in forward half was off the charts, inside 50s. I think it was something like, I can't remember how many, I think it was something like 25 inside 50s to 5 or something.
It was 23 to 5 at halftime. That might have been in that quarter.
No, in that second quarter.
And it was 3 goals, 8 to 2 goals straight. And as Scroll said, you leave the door ajar. If they had come out and kicked the first one, we kicked the first one, but then they had the next 4 scoring shots. And they kicked 2-2. That's 4 goals. It's game on. They're back in front or just behind.
Exactly.
And anything can happen from there.
The fortunate thing was, like I said, we caught the Swans on a poor day for them, but you don't want to be doing that sort of leaving the door open for some of the better clubs with that opportunity. Came good in the last, which was the promising thing when we kicked 8 goals 2, which is fantastic. That makes us all feel good, but it's just
some blinders. The goal from Kozzy.
The one from Melksham that was. That's where you're expected to score. You don't expect to score at all from that one. But that really made things look really good. But we keep talking about this every week, don't we? It just keeps coming up. So I don't know what to do about it.
Good. I was reflecting back in that first 6 or 7 games in 23. We were so far number 1 in the AFL for scoring accuracy. It wasn't funny, and Daniel Hoyne, I remember, was saying, it's an asterisk on our performance because remember we won the first 4 or 5 more. I think we won at least the first 6 or 7 in 23, didn't we? And he was saying just they're expected, like they're kicking out of their skin. So a lot of the same players. So maybe we'll have a good, maybe
got to take
have a good period.
But Anyway,
It'll
we'll
help
get
if
into-
Fritter gets his accuracy back. That's been a big factor, I reckon. And JVR out, like he was accurate when he was in. So
Lazy writes, 82 points from turnover, 43 points from stoppage, and 40 of our points originated in the back half. The metrics are all there to show that the game plan is starting to take shape, but the 43 points from stoppage, 15 of which were from centre bounce, was one of the things I was most stoked about in this game, and the spread of clearances. Pickett 6 clearances, 3 from centre, Salem 6, 3 from centre, Petrarca 2 and 2, Oliver 3 and 2, Gawn 7 and 1, Langford 3 and 1, and many more. It may very well have been the best midfield spread performance we've had in a while. My question is, our ascent back up the ladder can definitely be put down to the game plan starting to click, but for this team, could consistent clearances and scores from stoppage be the cherry on top and the multiplier effect that could take us further? Is the sky the limit for these Ds? So, big man, game plan starting to click, having almost a full complement of our best 22 and many of our stars starting to find their best form certainly helps. So what do you think about what Lazy has put forward there?
yeah, I think it's a really good point. And in the mid-season buy, I'll sort of drill down on a bit on the game plan. But I've got another clip to answer this question as well. So, Andy, can you play the first one? So the setup for this one is Daniel Hoyne talking about one of his hobby horses, which is the way the game's evolving in the last few years and the two types of ways of winning games of footy, one through the contest and the other through kicking skills and transition footy. And then I'll come back to sort of pick up those points to answer Lazy's question.
Now, I hope I've got the right timing of this because there was a bit of confusion, but I think I might have got it. If not, you'll have to fill everyone in.
Observations of the round, Hoyne?
Yeah, so we're going to start with brains over brawn. Okay, so this is where it's a bit of just a bigger picture conversation around where the game is going. So what do you value? Do you value the brawn with how you win contests, your toughness, your muscle to be able to extract contested possessions, extract clearances? Or do you value the brain, which is the ball use? The outside game, getting into space, and then the creativity, looking upfield. How do I put my teammates in a better position? And the reality is that we keep talking about this on this show in 2025. Give me the brain over the brawn. Okay, so if you have greater impact with how you use the footy than what your oppo does, you're winning 80% of matches this year. If you have greater impact with the brawn, how you're actually winning the footy, you're winning 70% of matches. So still high, but what you're doing with how you use it, that is modern day footy. And it's why our rating system this year, which has caused a few eyebrows, it's why so many halfback flankers are so high up because it's how you use it over how you win it. And I want to just get into it as to why this is the case, right? So you think about contest, and if you're relying on bashing up your opposition to win games of footy, that will get the job done throughout a home and away season and will get you a starting place on the grid. But when you get towards the end of the final series, the reality is you're coming up against teams that can handle their own.
Yep.
In a contest situation. It's not, they might not necessarily, rely on winning contests and clearance and bashing you up in that area, but they'll hold their own. So just think of the last two final series, right? And the last two premiers. So Brisbane last year played in 4 finals. Collingwood the year before played in 3 finals. So 7 finals in total. Only once did they win contested possession in those 7 finals. And that was Brisbane last year, grand final day, where they annihilated Sydney. They won contested possessions by 2.
Are they close to negligible?
By 2.
Are they close to negligible losses though?
Very close.
Yeah. So
Just
you can't
give
get
me
blown. You can't get blown away
no.
in contests though, can you?
100% spot on, and I'm glad you said that. So I'm not diminishing the contested possession side of things. Just give me the break-even profile.
Yeah.
Great, Andy. Thanks. So the reason I thought about that was in relation to this question about our game style, and I think that it really speaks to the challenge for Goody, because our wins since losing our first 5 games have been really, the difference has been the pressure we've suddenly brought in the contest. We're smashing other teams for contests. We're smashing teams for pressure. We're winning the hard ball, but we're not winning territory the same way that we were in 21 through to 23. We're not winning inside 50s to the same level. So where Goody is trying to implement that brain and brawn stuff, he's trying to get the ball in the smart users' hands, like Lindsay. That's why they're on the wings, to get him out, to get the ball, to put the halfback flankers like they talked about, McVee, who I think is really key to us, the way we want to play footy. But I think that Goody is developing a sort of hybrid model where, of course, pressure, we still want to win contests. That's our one wood, and that's the sort of players we've got. We've got Clary, we've got who, is a beast. We've got Track, who's a beast. So, but we're definitely making some fundamental change to our method. I argued about this last year and said that we were doing that last year. We began this process last year. We're third in the AFL for uncontested possessions, which is a reflection of the way we're chipping it around to stretch opposition zones and maintain possession until we can find a path forward to attack and then press the button and go. I reckon that also, as I've said before, helps us minimise turnovers and intercepts, because there's less emphasis on just getting it forward and dump kicking it, forward at all costs. We're still turning it over too much. Fourth in the AFL, Swans are number 1, which really came out on the weekend, didn't it? But we're way, way better in clangers than we were. We're 14th for clangers, better than the Pies, and just above Suns, Dockers, Dogs and Hawks, all teams that are excellent kicking side. So, even, I don't put much stock in the kicking efficiency stat, but for what it's worth, we're above the Swans for kicking efficiency, 68 to 64. We're second in the AFL behind Freo. That's probably a function of the way we chip it around, but Freo use that as well. So there's some real positives there. Another big change, and I haven't got the numbers, I've just heard this, that we third 3 weeks ago, I'm not sure where we are now, is how quick we're moving the ball. So evident on the weekend. It was so exciting to watch. But we're top 3 for how quickly we play on after a mark, and which I mentioned a few weeks ago, after a free kick or mark. And that was really evident on the weekend. And that's what generated that ball movement. We've still obviously got a long way to get the transition game right. For example, we're 18th still for scores from defensive half, but we're getting there. But to answer Lazy's question, I think we're getting there, combining our physical contest football, high pressure, win the contest. We're less worrying about stoppages, interestingly. Like, as I said in the numbers there, we're really trying to get turnover happening. As George noted, the key is having your best players playing well. And I think the addition of McVee, Lindsay and Langford. And if you want an example of how we want to move the ball and how we want to play, watch the goal that you mentioned that Melksham kicked. If you can either watch all the goals or watch the whole clip, we chipped it around for ages until we got the ball in May's hand, who then kicked it long to Langford, who immediately, it was a beautiful kick, didn't have to break stride. He immediately took off running, kicked it up to Melksham on the 50-metre line or just outside. Melksham immediately turned, wheeled and go and kicks the goal. That's how good he wants to play. Win the contest, win the clearances, sure, but also then move the ball effectively with hands and lots of short kicking until you've got that opportunity to go forward, and then when you do, go quick. So that to me was like the template of how we want to play.
Just a little tactical thing that I noticed during the game, that since we don't have another listener question around this, was the way we played or set up against Heaney. I thought it was interesting when he was playing forward, whoever was on him followed him into the next centre bounce. So you might have noticed particularly in the first half, because he, like I said, he got an injury around just before half time and didn't go into the middle again, as far as I know. So we saw McVee follow him in to the
That's why
Rivers.
McVie ended up in the centre. Right?
That's right. Yeah, McVie followed Rivers as well. Salem went into whoever was playing on Heaney in the back line followed him in, so that we didn't have to try and rotate someone into the middle.
So was that why Salem was in the middle?
Sorry,
was that why Salem was in the middle quite a few times?
Yeah, he followed Heaney in because Heaney was playing in the forward line. Salem was on him, centre bounce. Follows him in, so it's just a little tactical thing. Like I said, it meant they didn't have to try and match him with someone else in the middle or bringing someone off the bench at the last second trying to match him. So I thought that was an interesting tactical ploy.
Good pickup, George. And I mean, I guess the benefit of that is that potentially is that exactly as it suggests, you don't lose a player in handover. Someone as clever, someone as good as Heaney only needs a little bit of space to do damage, and that can happen in that. You saw it all the time with Kozzy. How much time did he have, like in terms of his centre bounce work? Remarkable. The other thing they did tactically that I didn't notice at all, either on the live or on the thingos, they actually asked about it in the presser of Cox, of having one of our players come off the halfback flank. He was asked about it, about why he didn't counter it, and I didn't notice us do that. So, I put a post on Demonland today saying that Goody's often been, I think unfairly, as I've said before, sort of disregarded his tactical ability, but he's done a lot of innovative stuff this season and a lot of different use of players. If you think how many players have rolled through the centre this year, it's been quite remarkable in the different positions. Turner up forward, Turner down back. He's done some interesting stuff.
Dominion says there's simply nothing more electric than Kozzy lighting up the G. 5 goals, which could easily have been 7 or more. We have to do everything in our power to keep him in the red and blue. 3 first-round picks, and we'll still be getting shortchanged. Spirit Nomsis says Kozzy was just electric. Rostar wrote a longer poem about the whole match because he couldn't call in. But here is his bit about Kozzy. And he says, but then enter Kozzy, who kicked 5 goals for. Geez, if he'd kicked straight, it'd have been goals galore. His poise, his speed, his deft of touch, it proved for the Swannies it was just too much. So, George, Kozzy lit up the G once again. We really do have to do everything in our power to keep him in the red and blue. How can you replace a player like Kozzy? What's his worth now?
You can't replace a player like Kozzy. It's as simple as that. He's that one in a generation type player that, is just electric. Binman's been through all the statistics for him. It was just a remarkable performance and very fitting, given for a Koori player playing in the Doug Nicholls round, and while Melbourne's carrying the moniker of Nam, to put in a performance like that, it did great credit to himself and everybody from his family and friends. He was just too good all round. He was a couple of years ago when he first started, we spoke about the comparisons with him and Cyril Rioli and how Rioli was used as a shock troop. And that's exactly what Kozzy's being used as at the moment. What surprised me, despite him, he had the highest metres gained of any player, I think, on the ground, yet he only had 76% game time, which was, apart from Spargo and Sharp and Rivers, as it turned out, that's one of the lowest in the side. It's quite remarkable. So he's being used as a shock troop, and boy, does he shock when he gets onto the ground. So yeah, he's been managed beautifully, playing the best that he's played ever in his career, with the numbers that Binman gave us before, and it's a pleasure for all of us to be able to witness that sort of player in action.
The other thing, just to sort of back up that idea of him being used as a shock troop, and I reckon Rioli is an awesome player, but you could mount a case that Cos might get to a higher level, and I think it's because he's a better midfielder. Like his numbers in this game as a midfielder were just off the charts. He had 21 centre bounce attendances. 21. And as you say, I really like how they're using him. It's a bit like the inverse of what you were saying with Heaney, is that he goes to the centre and then he immediately comes back out and goes down to the forward line. It must just be a nightmare for a matchup. 21 centre bounce attendance is massive. And he was, how many? I think he had 6 clearances, didn't he, Andy?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just something else. I couldn't believe, though, when he missed that goal, when he played on he took that mark and played on from 20 metres out.
He didn't need to. And he didn't need to go the torp either.
I didn't mind the torp, but no, that was a bit unusual as well. And a special request, great game, one of the best games of footy I've seen. It was right in front of me, that goal. He kicked the roller along the ground at the punt road end. If you play the audio, could you play the audio of his highlight package on mfc.com?
Yes, you do realise this is effectively radio and people
Yes,
can't
I
see
do.
it, but use your imagination. Anyone listening to the podcast about a 2.5-hour podcast about the D's was probably at the match, so you can use your
Yes, that's
imagination.
His mother spills to Chandler. Chandler, an inching ball to Pickett. What about this for the turnover? Pickett deep in the pocket.
Yeah, that's what you got to do from turnover.
And he plays on around the corner. Wasn't aware of it, Roberts, and drills the goal. You've got to be thinking he's going to go quickly.
You can't have your head down when he's tucked into the pocket like that. You've got to know he's going to roll around, or at least give yourself an opportunity to defend it if he does.
That was really sloppy, wasn't it?
That was just the one goal.
Don't do another one. That was poor. That was really poor defensively. I said it.
He wasn't even looking at Kozzy.
Geez. No, they were a bit all over the shop in where their heads were at, I reckon.
We heard from Dean.
You get the gist. It was fantastic performance.
It was. Go to either one of the D's social media pages or their website. You should be able to find the entire thing. It's worth the watch rather than the listen. You can pause this podcast to go do that. Let's move on. Jane02 writes, just a shout out to Clayton Oliver. None of us can even begin to understand what he has been through. He was absolutely sensational yesterday. I loved his goal and how loud and proud were the D supporters giving him a standing ovation after the goal in the fourth quarter. To see the love from all the other players and watching them all get around him warmed my demon heart. Clayton is back. And Lazy said, I thought this was Clary's best game of the season, possibly the last 2 seasons, 31 disposals, 8 score involvements, 25 centre bounce attendances, a goal. But here's the kicker, 12 tackles and 22 pressure acts. People were right to criticise earlier in the season when he simply didn't look like he could last the whole game. But if you ever need evidence of his endeavour, this game was it. We'll hopefully see his ability to run out the game improve as the season goes on. So big man, Clary is well and truly back. And how good was the raucous? We've talked about it, the raucous applause that he received from the members as he jogged back to the bench after that goal. It was just spine tingling, and I loved it.
How did they use? Was he playing a defensive role at any stage on anyone? I couldn't work out how they were using him. He didn't run with Heaney at all, did he, George?
No.
So he was just playing offensive mid, or he was so I thought his grunt work was just fantastic. And when one thing you can tell, one of the benefits of sitting that close to the ground level is, as I said, I had the binoculars on. So I watched even close. I watched with the binoculars. I watched him compete for a ball. There was a pack of about 6 or 7 players. He was manic, and his desire to get that football out eventually did kick it out. It was just something to watch up close in that way. I think I've talked about this all last season. I respected him so much for his performance last year. I have this year. You can't do anything about, that's partly why I wanted to touch on that Nick Dacos clip, because, that's where Claz is at, is he's still building his fitness. It's a challenge to do. He's getting there. He's clearly running out games better than he was. But I've never, last season and this season, his endeavour and effort, which is what I care about most of all, has never wavered. He's been, I just think, just a great servant of the footy club this year and last year. Last year in particular, given how much he had going on and how hard it was to play each week. His rating, he gets 7 coaches' votes, 16.3 player rating, 130 super coach points. He Let's have a look here. Time on ground, 80%. So that's that's starting to use him as a bit of a shock player as well, I guess. 71 disposal efficiency. I think his kicking is a lot better in the last few weeks. I really admire how he's been able to, it's been important for the senior players to adapt the game plan to be less sort of territory focused and be a bit more judicious about how they use the ball. 5 inside 50s. He had 10 contested possessions, 9 ground ball gets, 6 post clearance possessions. He was involved in the game 71% of the time in centre bounces. He was there. As I said, 5 post clearance possession. This was an interesting number. He had a team high 16 handball receives, which was really interesting in terms of how they use him. By way of comparison, their highest handball receive was their runner, Chad Warner. And by way of his equal high number was Caleb Windsor. So it really shows the role that he played in terms of being a player who they fed the ball out to. And his use of handball in space and his spatial awareness is just a thing of beauty to watch. He's got such good footy IQ. He took only 2 marks, but he had 3 clearances, which isn't massive for him. But as Lazy said, 22 pressure acts and James Jordan had the most, 29. In fact, the first 3 pressure acts rating were all Swans players. He was our highest, most number of pressure rating, 21. Just an all-round fantastic performance. He had 8 score involvements as well. Kozzy had 13 score involvements, looking at that, which is something nuts, isn't it? But, it just showed how involved he was in the game. 8 score involvements. Christian Salem, by the way, he had 12 score involvements, which is pretty damn impressive. So brilliant game from Claz. I wonder whether, the challenge of backing up another game, that's 2 games in a row he's played at a really elite level, getting closer to his best form. I love it. I just love him. He's one of my all-time favourite players, full stop.
And what you didn't discuss was the treatment he's received in the media with all the speculation and that he's had to cop over the last year and even in the last couple of weeks, and about leave, that he should go to Geelong or wherever. Add to that, them talking about
the $1 million tagger.
The tagger. It's so disrespectful. He's playing a role, and that's a role he's been asked to by his coach to help out his team.
He asked for the first time. He went to that's what Goody said. He came to me and said, "I want to take Lockie Neal." Well, was it? No, not the. Was it the week before?
The week before.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's. Goody's been great. Goody's been great at supporting him. Maxi has been awesome. One of the really nice things, if you watch the game after the game, Brodie Grundy comes over to him and gives him a massive hug.
And Grundy's that type of guy that would, because he cares and he's played with Clary. So
I totally agree. And look, Claz isn't someone who's gonna be on social media like Smith and be all funny, ha ha ha, make jokes about bloody nose beers and all of that palaver. He just keeps to himself, and it feels to me he's like a bit of an easy target. And it's just as you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. Completely disrespectful. It's a self-generated media noise. How about just tell us about the footy, for God's sake? Don't tell us about the gossip and any of that stuff. And some credit where it's due. This guy is a legend of the Melbourne Footy Club and is getting close to playing his best footy. He was instrumental in that victory. He was instrumental in the victory last week in our top 3 players in coaches' votes and in player ratings. I just love him. I just think he's way up there in my all-time favourite Demons. Top 5 for sure for me.
Smurf says, how good was Track? He was explosive at times. The burst out of the middle when he dished off to Sharp was just magical. Congrats on 200 games at the Ds. So George, it's great to see Track bursting out of the middle, having fun playing footy, brandishing those Colgate pearly whites. And that's not an ad for you, Colgate. Against Heaney as well.
Yeah, 200 games for the club. They've gone so fast, unfortunately, hasn't it? That's he's getting back to his best. Absolutely getting back to his best, which is just delightful to watch. His confidence is growing He's doing what he wants to do. But I think the main thing is he's got that confidence in his body now. It's exactly what he needs. The other thing was, what was the Italian song when he kicked that goal? They played
Amore.
That's Amore. That's Amore. Yeah. Well, that's what it is. That's what we love. I'm not one who would promote this stupid idea of playing songs after goals.
I'm not a fan. Just
not a
as
fan.
A side
So,
note.
message to the Melbourne Football Club: if you're listening, stop it. But,
and also, at least come to me and ask what good Italian song might we pick, Bin Man. I mean, good Lord, Enrico Morricone, or you can so many, and they go with that song, please.
Oh, well, it means, that's love. So when we're talking about love pre-season, but
I thought it was about
we love your track. So
I thought it was about. I thought it was about pizzas.
You got to handle it to our special event team. We've got the Irish jig dancers and the Italian Amore.
All in indigenous round. Yeah.
Yeah, and as Bin Man noted, he was our second highest metered gain behind Pickett for the game. He really is getting back to his best.
Yeah,
and he's I said a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, but I'm really, really enjoying his leadership. I think he's grown in that space a lot. I've always thought that's probably an area of potential growth for him. He's been so focused on his own sort of improvement, which is totally understandable. But he's never really, except his performances on the field showed leadership, but he's never really struck me as like a natural leader of other men. So, but he seems to be growing into it. And I heard a couple of interviews with him, and one of them is that he says he's 29 and he's getting, towards the back end of his career, and something he's really, really enjoying is mentoring the younger players like Langford and Lindsay, and that's really, you can really see it on field. I love his body language, and I'd tell you what, if I was Goody, speaking of kicking for goal, I would just say to Track, no run up. Just one step, just kick it. I was so pleased he dropped that mark from Salem didn't reach him, because if he'd gone back and had a set shot, he had no chance. But off one step, not a problem.
That goal he kicked on 50 reminded me of the first goal in the grand final.
Yeah, I've heard a few people say that. Set up by Salem.
We weren't there to see it in the flesh, but we sort of got a facsimile of it. We've got Redlegs 23 on the line. G'day. How you going?
G'day, gents. How are we?
We're very good, thank you.
Lovely. Once again, awesome pod, guys. So appreciate the work that you guys do. So much props.
Thank you.
Last week I gave I'm in a loving mood, actually. I've listened to Simon. I gave him a pump up last week, and this week I'll do the same. And on cue, in regards to Christian Petrarca, wow, we all know what happened last year, almost about a year ago. The bloke was had injuries that had everyone questioning whether this bloke's going to be able to come back and be as good as or as dynamic as he once was, and he also was questioned, from us as supporters, questioned his loyalty to the club, whether he's going to be around, and all the trade talk and the rest of it. He's just had a lot of questions the last little while. And for him to come out and show the leadership, as you were saying, Bin Man, just a moment ago, it speaks volumes of the bloke. And you can feel that love, his energy, his persona, his smile. The way he goes about his footy at the moment is just so happy and enthusiastic, and it seems to be resonating around the group. And I felt that yesterday at the G. It was just awesome to be, almost 40,000 people, a beautiful Sunday afternoon, and to see him get the rewards and the crowd sort of pay him back, and just in such a great game, and he had a top performance himself as well. It was just, the energy was just amazing yesterday, and it just reflected almost came across as to how Christian would be: energetic, having fun out there, smiling, celebrating. It was just a really joyful day yesterday. I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I just wanted to give him his props. And also as well, it's a top topic you bring up, man, in regards to leadership, because you're spot on. I felt the same thing. I think a lot of our good players early days were probably our most immature players as well. But I've always thought that Jake Lever, just from being in training and how he sort of directs traffic and speaks to the guys, that Jake Lever was probably the next man in line after Max, and obviously you got Jack Viney as well. But the thing is, with Jack and also with Lever, I'm not too sure their bodies are going to be able to hold up. So the next guy I'm thinking really at the moment is probably one. I want to get your thoughts as well. Is who do you really think after Max, which is probably another year or two max, is going to be our next skipper? What do you guys think? I think it tracks every chance.
Yeah, so I was also thinking Lever, but you bring up a very interesting point about his body. It's made of glass these days. Track. I never would have pegged Track as a leader. He never came up in my head as in conversation as being a future captain. But I think we've seen a turnaround this year. And I think he's probably, next in line. I mean, I can't think of really anyone else. George?
No, he's probably the next one in line. There's a bit of an age gap, sort of down to sort of the Rivers as the next one after that. But Track's the obvious one at this point in time.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's really funny you should say that, Alex, because I was saying something similar, thinking something similar the other day. Is that Lever was the one. He seems to be, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's actually really funny. He seems like he seems like a great bloke, Rick Lever, I have to say.
Absolutely.
There's that footage of him on the interchange bench. He got AFL permission to be on the interchange bench while he was rehabbing. And there's about a 10-minute clip of him on the interchange bench in the Hawks game, and it's just brilliant. It is really brilliant, and his energy and his leadership, even from the bench, is really impressive. But I'm on board. Is that in my mind, I was thinking, well, he's the obvious next cab off the rank, and in a way, not thinking Track, but I really think Track's growing into it, and in a way, I think it would be fitting for him to finish his career at the Demons as a skipper. He reminds me, I never saw Barassi play, but except for clips, I never saw him live, obviously. But he reminds me in the way he plays like Barras in that sort of in that way, and I'd love for him to become captain, and I think it'd be really good for the club, almost a way of squaring the circle, so to speak. Just the other thing about Track I really, really like to highlight is I really, really like the way he talks about his own emotions, and in the context of the mental health stuff that the AFL is so poorly struggling with. Like, for me, the idea of them doing a bloody mental health round just drives me insane. Stop, going back to the attacking of Clas. Tell the football media that you control, including AFL.com media, to leave people alone and not drag up this stuff if you're serious about mental health. Don't do a mental health round. But to hear Petrarca talk about how he struggles, about how his emotions, about his obvious love for his family and his partner, I think is really, really important and really, really healthy for particularly for young men to hear. So, and to me, that's a really important form of leadership. So, I'm well on board the Track for captain train.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, guys, just one more as well.
Sure.
Just a quick pump up for Turner. I'm seeing this kid go every week in the back line, and he's just looking more and more comfortable to me. His ground ball level game looks pretty good. Yep. He seems to have time, and he just seems very confident at the minute.
It's the confidence. Yep.
Yeah, he just is.
He just looks
like he's ready.
You know what he does? He backs himself to take the mark. Which, especially when a punch is necessary, he'll punch. But he reads the ball so well. There are a few times where he didn't actually mark it, but the ball went. He pegged or he clocked that the ball was going over the hands of the forward in front of him, and he went for the mark. He didn't take it, but it didn't. It wasn't a putt. Like, I back him to take that mark if he can take it. But yeah, he reads it well, and he's going to be a fantastic defender.
Yeah, I'm actually most confident in the air with him.
Yeah.
Amongst May, Lever, the whole lot of them. Like his hands at the minute and his reading of the play as a tall backman at the minute, I feel it's probably at the best in our back six.
Yeah.
Love Salo as well. He great that he got the pill yesterday, but gee whiz, he turned the ball over.
Something's happened with his kicking. It's not the same as it was.
No, and they actually resulted in direct goals as well. Some of them, and a lot of them were actually under no pressure. We would kick hospital balls, and so hopefully he tidies that up. But look, that's been happening for a little while now. So, but look, all in all, great day. Thanks for listening, guys, and go D's.
All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate the call, and I'm sure we'll hear from you soon.
See you guys.
Yeah, that was Red Leagues 23. Great caller to the show. Talking about Salem, Mandalorian says, wondering what the panel's thoughts were on Salem's games. Was interesting to see him attend so many centre bounces. Despite a couple of errant kicks, as we just discussed, I thought it was his best game in years and loved the goal that he kicked vintage Salem. Well, I was going to ask you, B-Man, if you were surprised to see him lining up in the middle. George has answered the reason why.
Yeah, which is a great pickup. I didn't get it. I agree with that's the best game he's played this season. I take the point about his turnovers, but he did hit some pretty good kicks as well. I have to say, confirmation bias is your focus on his misses, but he, I thought actually he hit. I mean, including that one, it didn't get to him, but the vision to see track. Although I guess he was all by himself to set up that goal, but. Obviously, the coaches were similarly impressed. He got 6 coaches' votes, 31 disposals. That's a lot for him in the last few years or last 2 or 3 seasons. 402 metres gained. I thought he played really aggressively, really high. So I thought our defensive structure was brilliant, and the way we set the ground up and the sort of combination of stretching the ground width-wise but also pressing up and making it difficult. He was really quite an offensive weapon, and it wasn't just when he was tracking Heaney. He had 9 ground ball gets, 11 contested possessions, 4 times inside 50. So way of contrast, he had 4 inside 50s. Kozzy only had 3, despite having 21 centre bounce attendances, Koz. So time on ground, 87%. So he was, a solid game in terms of his numbers, of how long he was on the ground. 4 post-clearance possessions, ground ball gets, he won 3 of them. And just the big one for him is his score involvements, 12 score involvements. Again, I keep saying things like I can't imagine he'd have too many more than that very often, but I can't imagine that he'd have too many more than that this season. 12 score involvements, was second on the ground behind Kozzy, who had a massive, unbelievable 13. So that's an amazing number, isn't it? They put work into Bowie, which, that we've talked about, and George has talked about it before, is it's all very well tagging a player, but as Nick Dacos actually went on to say in that interview we were talking about, he was asked about tagging and said, well, it frees up other players, and perhaps the tagging of Bowie frees up Christian Salem to be, to end up with 12 score involvements, 14 pressure acts, 4 tackles, a goal assist. Yeah, I reckon his best game in a long, long time. And if you, as Daniel Hoyne was saying, he's been banging on about this for a few weeks, is the most important kickers and players in footy at the moment are off the halfback flank. And that's where he's playing. So if you've got him and McVie and Bowie all playing well, who must be a chance for All-Australian Bowie, that all goes well for our defensive system.
Yeah, certainly if we end up making the finals and playing deep, and he continues on along that trajectory, he should be in the conversation, but because he's a no-name in the media, he's not one of the darling clubs. Probably won't. Doug Remus says, also, I know he's a bit of an almost man, but my God, AJ, that's Aidan Johnson, competes with everything he's got. It's refreshing to see a mature age player attacking every loose ball like he's playing for his rent. I think we are a better team with him in it. We need to keep playing AJ until he feels he belongs, and then he'll start taking those marks and kicking a couple of goals a game. And Stu says it's easy to look at AJ and Petty's games from a stats perspective and think they contributed very little. However, Petty was able to bring the ball to ground a lot and stop McCartan from intercepting. On several occasions, AJ literally bulldozed several Swans players to clear a path, got a hand in to disrupt a handball chain or knock the ball to advantage of others. I think he directly assisted in 2 or 3 goals that wouldn't have registered a disposal. Do you each feel one goal between them is sustainable if they are routinely bringing that type of forward pressure and create that number of opportunities for our small and medium players? So, George, what did you think about the games of AJ and Pet as our big men up forward?
Magnificent, quite frankly. People just look at who's kicked the goals and I think that was fantastic. Yeah. But certainly AJ was primarily responsible for 3 goals being scored for our team. Because he absolutely burst the pack apart that enabled the small forwards to be able to get those goals in the first place. He created something out of nothing on a couple of occasions.
It was a beautiful handball to Kozzy to kick one of his goals as well.
And I think he nearly sent, it was Rowbottom or Rampy, I think he nearly sent him into next week with one of the bumps that he did. And he didn't recover from the hit. So, you wonder why the opposition doesn't score. It's because one of their best defenders has still got stars in his eyes, so to speak, from being hit. If AJ had marked those 2 opportunities,
one of those chest marks.
One was the chest. If he'd marked that, people would be going, "He's fantastic, great." Wouldn't have been any questions coming up about it. So, keep him in the side. The enthusiasm that we spoke about that he brings to the side is something important as well. So, I think he should and will be in the position next week. Petty, it did exactly what we need him to do. The Swans are missing a lot of their tall backs, so Petty really only had McCartan to deal with, and I think McCartan only had 3 marks for the game.
It was absolutely a defensive forwards performance. He was set to minimise his intercept marking.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Just to compete once again, bring the ball to ground, and it wasn't surprising, and we got the talls doing exactly what the talls need to do. If you can't mark the ball, then bring it to ground, and the opportunities open up for the smalls. And guess what? Our smalls scored the goals. So it's not just about who's got the bigger numbers on the scoreboard at the end. It's about the work that's put in to achieve those results. So both of those were fantastic. So I think McCartan only had 4 marks for the whole game. Normally he's one of him and Blakey, of course, were their primary intercept. So it was a great job done by him.
Yeah, and look, I think you're spot on, George. I just don't think you can underestimate the importance of key forwards bringing the ball to the ground. I think it's just people tend to underestimate how important it is. It's arguably the most important metric these days for key forwards is, 1, not allowing intercept marks, and 2, bringing it to ground in a way that allows your smalls and mediums to go to work. It's the weakness. One of the weaknesses of the Champion Data player rating system is it doesn't really factor in things like adherence to role, the significance to structure. And I'd argue that Petty and Pets and AJ were both much more influential than their player ratings suggest. They were both way down the bottom of the player rating charts, but because it doesn't, it also doesn't factor in, George, the energy he brings. And again, one of the things about being so close to the action is it was amazing, the physicality. McCartan must have 10 kilos on Pets. Like, he's a big boy, big lad. And the amount of physicality, like the wrestling and the hits and the locking arms and that Petty and McCartan were doing the whole game was exhausting just to watch. And same with AJ. Like, you can just watching him up so close, like the way he smashes into contests was seriously something to see. You can hear them smash smashing in. Such a pity he didn't take that mark because it was a beautiful bit of play. I think it came straight out of the centre, didn't it? Maybe it was even Claz coming out of the centre and driving it down. So, and he had it, it was right there for him. So I just feel like a little bit I'd like to see, I think that there's a limit to how much, you can pick people for just their energy, I think. And I think Colt was, in that boat is that you can't rely on just energy alone. So he needs to be kicking goals, I think. I mentioned before how actual little rucking he did. So, I think if he's going to stay in the team, he has to start clunking some of those marks. He's got to start kicking some goals, in addition to still bringing that energy, because he's not really going to, well, so far he's hardly been used in the ruck at all. So I feel like it's really him and JVR now for the same spot, because if he's only going to 15 ruck contests a match, then JVR can do that without sort of depleting his energy too much. I'd be happy to, we'll talk about it later, but I'd be happy, to be honest, as much as I love JVR and I think he's got a massive future. I can't believe people are down on him after a few sort of, bad games and back to the twos. That's what you go back to the twos for. But I'd be more than happy for AJ to get a good run at it, even if it's JVR's expense, get 2 or 3 games under his belt. I feel like if he can get a bit more confidence and clunk a couple of those marks and kicks them, it almost looks like he's trying out a bit too hard, if that makes sense. Yeah. If he can relax a little bit and not feel like his position's under threat each week, we might see the best of him. And he was a forward, 2-goal-a-game forward at Werribee. He's not a great ruckman. I reckon JVR's a better ruckman. But I totally agree with what you said, George. His energy it's infectious just watching it, let alone playing with it. And just back to Redleg's point about, I think George mentioned it as well, the joy was palpable, wasn't it? It was great. The players were around each other. Kozzy was having fun. The whole energy was up and about, and AJ brings it, contributes to that. It's a great story as well. That's the other thing that's terrific.
Ross Millen says there was much talk about McDonald's omission prior to the game. What did the panel make of it, and how did they assess Lever's performance? Do we think T-Mac will be back in the side this week? Now, Big Man, I know that you're a fan of T-Mac, as am I, but do you remember that pre-season function that we attended? We were chatting with someone. I'll leave out the name, and by the end of the conversation, the takeaway, it was pretty clear, assuming we had a full complement of defenders, May, Lever, and either Disco or Petty, depending who was playing forward or back. It would be T-Mac who would be the odd one out, and that really
that Melbourne employee.
That idea really challenged your view of the team, and at the time you couldn't see a world where T-Mac wasn't picked in defence. And since round 1, we haven't had both May and Lever on the park together. May missed round 1 and 2 and only returned in round 3, and Lever has been out since round 2. So T-Mac has been in the side, and in my opinion, he's undoubtedly been probably our best defender during that stretch. The fast forward to this week, Lever returns to join May and Disco. He had a very solid game in defence last week. And who gets omitted? T-Mac. He wasn't managed. At least that wasn't the language that was used. And sure, Marty and Logan McDonald are out, so maybe the matchups didn't demand an extra tool, giving the coaches the flexibility to rest T-Mac. But will he come back in this week? I'm not so sure. The male that we picked up on that night might just be playing out now. And I know you're not thrilled with that and can't quite wrap your head around it, but here we are. What did you make of the decision? And do you think there's a path back into defence for T-Mac, barring injury, given this could be the coaching department's preferred setup?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Andy, because I was hoping I would see that person again and go, see, I told you you were wrong and I was right. But it took around 11 and that person was right and I'm incorrect. Look, when I first heard it, I put on D-Man, like my first reaction, I posted straight away as soon as after I saw it, is like I thought it was insanely tough, like a really tough decision. And so, we don't know the ins and outs. So, selection's a bit, you've got to give, I've been critical of Goody's, say his continuing selection of Fritter. He's come good. I think, he's been brave with dropping JVR. And, so he's made some good calls. So my initial reaction was I thought, geez, that's really super tough on T-Mac. But when, in combination with a bit of time and also reading some really good posts on Demonland that sort of unpacked that a little bit, I shifted, not too long after that. I thought that if Goody was asked, and I'm surprised I didn't hear it. I was sure he'd be asked about it, but I didn't hear him asked about it. My sense was his response would have been, well, it's flagged already that we need to manage our older players. That's number one. Number two, there was no real matchup because they'd lost.
Amadi was out. Logan McDonald's been out.
Francis was out, and so they were really struggling for height. So there was clearly a matchup problem. I don't see any world in which Goody, if Lever is fit and May is fit, that they don't get selected. Simple as that.
Yeah.
So,
and then Disco, they're not playing four tools in defence.
Again, not against the Swans, no. So not against this version of the Swans, with no Logan McDonald and no Amadi and no Francis to be able to push forward. I know he's a defender, but, gives them flexibility to move the tools around. That means that there was a short straw for a tall. So, to be honest, it comes down between Lever and T-Mac. And, if I was to put my, as much as I love T-Mac, if I was to put my hard-nosed hat on, so to speak, is Turner's the future. And he's got what T-Mac doesn't, or not to the same extent. I think T-Mac's been brilliant this year, but Turner's quicker, no doubt about it. He's actually surprisingly quick, Turner, and his lateral movement is unbelievably good for a big fella.
He can turn,
and you can see that play out the way he's taken in the last 2-3 weeks. Some fantastic marks running back with the flight of the ball.
He took a beautiful one on the weekend as well. Just. Read it well.
Yeah, ran back. That's right.
Ran back and chest marking
that speed. That's where T-Mac's going to struggle. Is that if you don't need four tools, I think Turner's ahead of him because of his leg speed and his agility. I don't think Lever or May will ever play a game at Casey unless they're coming back from injury or they're close to retiring. I think T-Mac, unfortunately, is in that position as being the fourth tall, who's probably the one who's going to come out. And I think really in modern footy, the way footy is at the moment, and Pies are the perfect example of this, if you push up your defensive line high the way we did on the weekend a lot, and you create that wall and you're doing that, you need to have some players with serious leg speed to get back towards goal if the ball's turned over. And speed is super important. Foot speed is super important for defenders. And we've got McVie, we've got Windsor back there for that reason, both offensively and defensively. Who's the one I'm missing? Bowie's got pretty good wheels as well. And so you can't, if it comes down to leg speed, Turner's going to be picked ahead of him. So really, really tough. He'd be in our top 10 for the Bluey at this stage of the year, and he's getting dropped. To be honest, it's as much as I love T-Mac, it's a bloody good sign for the club that we're talking about, dropping a player who's in our top 10, in the Bluey. So will he come back in? I haven't actually looked. George has probably got a better handle on this. I haven't had a good look at the Saints lineup. It takes me till Thursday, Friday before I can turn my mind really properly to the next game. But I don't know, George, is there enough tools in the Saints team to ration?
King's out, I think, at the moment. So no, I don't think they do have enough.
So it'll be interesting. But look, I think Turner's an exceptional talent. I think who is only going to improve. And the other thing is, your point is a really super important one, Andy, and I made this point on Demonland when discussing this very topic, is that Lever and May don't lose many games when they're both in the same side. No. The sum of the parts of Lever and May together is greater than the individual. If they play great footy together. It's important they play together. So really it comes down to T-Mac or Turner, and I think Turner's got his nose in front.
Can he be played forward, or is that ship sailed?
Well, I think the pace is an issue up forward as well. Like they've got to work up hard up the ground. Like he's okay. I mean, his pace is not. It's not shocking. Like it's not. But his sort of lateral movement is not brilliant. No, I mean, of course they could try him up forward, but I honestly don't think our forward line is, is quite the problem. I mean, of course we've had challenges, but if we kick accurately, this season again, is like Tommy. He's an accurate kick for goal, but no, I can't see them wanting to disrupt the forward line to bring him up forward.
All right, well, let's get into Casey. Casey Demons delivered a resounding 71-point victory over a struggling Northern Bullants outfit in round 9 of the VFL season at Genis Steel Oval. The match was effectively over by half-time, with Casey building a 55-point lead on the back of relentless pressure, midfield dominance and efficient forward-line execution. Casey set the tone early, slamming on 5 goals while holding the Bullants scoreless in the first quarter. In the second, Casey's continued dominance saw the Demons surge to a 55-point lead at the main break. The onslaught continued in the third, with Casey kicking another 5 goals to the Bullants 1 point. With the game well in hand, Casey eased off in the last, allowing the Bullants to kick 6 late goals, but the damage had already been done. The victory, while comprehensive, came against a Northern Bullants side in crisis, winless in 2025, battling financial instability and low morale, a board upheaval and impending rebranding to the Preston Football Club for 2026 reflect deeper challenges, and the Bullants' once proud home ground, a community hub in decades past, now draws modest crowds and lacks the former passion that made it a feared venue. AFL listed talent was on full display, with 16 affiliated players in Casey's side, contributing heavily to the result. The Demons controlled the midfield from the outset, driven by an elite ruck tandem and an industrious on-ball unit. Tom Campbell, 30 hitouts, 23 disposals, 9 clearances and a goal, and Will Varell, 28 hitouts, 17 disposals and 9 clearances, gave Casey first use of the ball. Riley Bonner, 34 disposals, Mitch Hardy, 33, Jack Billings, 31, 8 marks and a goal, Bailey Lowry, 27 and 2 goals, and Blake Howes, 25, were prolific throughout the middle. Matthew Jefferson had a breakout game with 5 goals, showcasing some improved aerial work and mobility. Tom Fullerton chipped in with 3 goals, and Jacob Van Rooyen added 2 goals, 13 marks and 19 disposals, playing a dynamic high forward role. Other goal kickers included Laurie Tu, Woden, Srak, if that's how you say his name, Henderson, Billings and Campbell, 1 each. Tajwa Woden, 21 disposals and a goal. Jack Henderson, 15 disposals, 10 tackles. Kynan Brown, 19 disposals and 4 tackles, also made solid contributions. And Jed Adams held firm in defence, while Ollie Seston, Colton Tolstrom and Luke Kentfield and Ricky Mentha all contributed around the ground. George, did you see any of it?
Yeah, watch the game. It's difficult to take anything away from the game because the opposition were just so poor. It was, you hear the description of witches' hats. That's exactly what it was like in this game, unfortunately. To give you an idea about the quality of the opposition, for Casey, a 19-year-old Tyson Srook in his very first game had 21 disposals. That's sort of unheard of. He barely, doesn't make the team in the first place, and yet he can get 21 disposals in that game. So it wasn't surprising that, we had multiple players with over 30 possessions. Tom Campbell had an absolute party in the middle with what he was doing in the ruck and around the ground. Jeffo, 5 goals, Fullerton, 3 goals. I wouldn't read too much into that in the sense that I think Jeffo had 3 goals from lead and mark. Fullerton the same. I think all 3 from lead and mark. You don't get that opportunity at AFL level. It just doesn't happen. We were talking about marks in the forward line before. They just don't occur. It's about bringing the ball to the ground so others can do the scoring. So, you can't do anything about it other than kick 5 goals or 3 goals. But JVR was working really hard up the ground, 13 marks. I was impressed with that, particularly how far up the ground he was working, which is exactly what we want him to do. Seston in the back line, again, had an absolute party.
Such a good kicker.
Yeah, but it was also nice and easy to do when you've got no opposition to do those kicks. Just waltzed out of the back line. There was one particular kick where he kicked it out from full back and it went well past the centre line. with a bit of wind assistance. So, yeah, he had a ripper of a game. The Bullants were just awful. There's not much you can really say. They came back. They had 5 goals straight in the last quarter, and I think it was during the period that Tom Campbell was off the ground. As soon as Tom came back on, it seemed to all the rot seemed to stop again. They were using Verrill in the ruck a lot more than what they have done so in the past. They're obviously sort of pinning hopes on him coming through as a backup ruck sort of role in for the future. So it was at the end of the day a good training run. That was about all.
The thing I'd say though, like I totally agree with Preston's level, but on a positive side is that I've seen plenty of games of footy at the VFL level where that one of the teams is woeful and the other team plays down to their level and just goes through the motions. It didn't feel like that to me. I was really some positives. I thought Jeffo's energy around the contest was terrific. He laid 2 tackles that he was rewarded with and got dropping the ball. So 2 of his 5 goals were from holding the ball decisions in front of goal that he earned, that they were really good tackles, that he went in hard. He was after it on the ground. I agree totally on JVR, worked up the ground super hard. He struggled. That's why you go back to the 2s, is to work on things that you've been struggling on. He's been struggling big time, clunking his marks, almost as if he's not timing his jumping properly. So for him to grab 13 marks, regardless of the opposition, was terrific. Totally take your point on Seston, sort of, a lot of these kicks weren't under much pressure, but he hits targets. He hits those critical 20 to 30 metre target that we just talked about Salem missing. The Redlegs 23 talked about him turning over under no pressure. Seston doesn't miss them. He is such a good kicker. And one goal that they kicked was he got the ball on the half-back flank, a good 20, 30 metre kick to the centre, it keeps running, gets the ball, good 20, 30 metre kick to half-forward flank, gets the ball back and kicks inside to set the goal up. I thought he was terrific. So I thought there was a bit to take out of it, not least of which I really was impressed with Jeffo's energy and effort. I really liked the way JVR went about it. And Colt didn't have a great game numbers-wise, but I really, after giving him a bit of a bagging last week about his energy and his body language, it was much, much better in the game this week, I thought. So, just as a curiosity, Andy, this is a dyslexic's nightmare here, is that we kicked 19-17 in that game. 19-17 in the seniors game, 19-17, and in the VFL game, we kicked 17-19.
I know.
I wonder when the last time it is that our senior game, this is a question for you to dig up, Andy, it's some homework. When's the last time that the Melbourne's ones team and the Melbourne's twos team had 72 scoring shots on a weekend?
Well,
121 and 131 points, 252 points between them. That's serious scoring.
Yeah, you'll have to ask that the guy on Twitter.
Mr. Swamp.
Swamp. Another
Super
interesting.
Mikado probably will be able to give us something.
He may be able to do that too.
Another
interesting stats.
If you could get back to me,
Max Gawn has kicked 111 goals and 111 behinds, and he is number 11.
Max Gawn.
Max Gawn, yeah.
He's going 50-50. I find that hard to believe. Is that an AI-generated hallucination?
No, I saw that. Well, I did see it on Facebook, so you can't believe everything you see. But I think it was Triple M maybe had posted it, so you would hope that they would have. If they're going to post something like
footy
that.
media.
Okay.
I don't think they're things called editors anymore, Andy.
I know. All right, I'll take it back. If someone can. Oh, actually, AFL tables will tell me exactly what whether that is correct or not.
I think it's actually 111 goals, 111 points, and 111 on the full.
I didn't count on the full
jumper number 11.
And jumper number 11. Yeah.
Well, he started 37, so he has prior to this. Did he kick 1 goal 1 this week?
He didn't kick any goal, did he?
He did kick a goal, the first goal.
kicked
He
one.
gave.
That's right. I hadn't got to the ground then, and so it was
Oh, well, there you
that-
go. Who's the supporter now?
Well,
Getting to
the
the
West
game late.
owner bus. I had to get a bus out of the blue. Bloody hell.
He was on 110, I think, prior to this week. So he definitely, he kicked a point as well. He kicked that one from outside 50 that looked good off the boot and then just didn't quite get there. All right, let's get into our changes for this week. Jack Viney has now missed 3 games due to ongoing concussion symptoms from the knock he received in the match against the Eagles in round 8. And let's hope those symptoms have subsided and the only headaches is a selection headache when figuring out who to drop from an emphatic 53-point win. Charlie Spargo copped a knock in a vicious collision with Swans captain Callum Mills, who only got 1 week for that one. So let's hope Charlie's all right. He was later sent from the ground. Was he sent by the umpires to test for concussion? I couldn't work that out.
Yes, but they called down to the ground.
Yeah,
the AFL.
The doctor.
The AFL doctor. They can call. Yes,
can call, and they stopped, and because the doctor, there's been problems where the doctor can't get the attention of the players and all the umpires.
Oh, that's all right.
Because you can hear on the replay, you can hear one of the umpires saying HIA test.
So there was there any confusion post match about whether he was subbed out for the concussion or as a result of the knock, or
keep past his HIA test, so he's right to go. His shoulder was injured. That was the injury.
Yeah. So,
but they immediately subbed him. That's what Goody said in the presser.
If he's going to be 20 minutes,
test,
So, he could be sidelined for the clash against the Saints with that shoulder injury. So some of our posters have some questions regarding selection that you boys can ponder when you talk about your changes. And Wells 11 says, strange question to ask as Viney is a gun, but the mix in the middle looks so good at the moment with Rivers and Kozzy and Oliver firing again. How can we bring him back in and keep the synergy? Witch's Hat says, assuming Spargo is unavailable and Viney is available, does Jack come in and play that role? The Endy's Nye asks, will we benefit from playing AJ up north? Are we in a position to rest anyone / develop others? Should we be pushing our best team each week to try and recover percentage lost in the early season? And if so, are we able to see the most exciting day since 2021? Monocular says, Spargo offered little apart from 1 good tackle before being subbed. Sharp took his chance as well with pace, pressure and 2 goals. If Spargo is concussed, could this be the answer to the ongoing dilemma? And I think he means the ongoing Spargo dilemma. And also from Monocular says, was Lever hobbling in the last few minutes? If so, is T-Mac ready to come back in? So, George, followed by Big Man, your changes for this week.
Firstly, to go to Monocular's observation, yes, Lever was, and I don't know.
Made a glass.
So, it really didn't look good. It was only a couple of minutes before the end. He was running back into defence and he made one of those motions that you see like when guys do their hamstrings.
Or he then ran flat out for it.
Yeah, so whether it was the ankle or something happening, but he just pulled up really quickly and then played out the few remaining minutes of the game. But you sort of, given that he's just come back from all that ankle surgery, was something going on there. So
I guarantee you, we won't hear anything all week, and then he won't be picked or he'll be away with
he was fine. He was asked in the presser and said,
how many times have we heard that? And then they pull out 2 minutes before the game.
4 to 6.
Yeah.
They'll bring someone in from Bunnings, Collingwood.
So apart from that one, I think Spargo, for injury reasons, or as Monocular also says, he's just not offering anything in the up forward. It's 1 goal out of, 10 games, 11 games.
Yeah, except that's not his KPI. I feel like we're heading back into Nibbler territory.
No. But he's got to do more than that.
Well, no, he doesn't. He's got to do whatever his role is.
Well, look, I'll tell you
we
what.
don't fully know what his role is. That's why he keeps getting selected. It's like have a LSD flashback to Nibbler's first 3-4 seasons.
They'll be selecting me next week because I can do 4 tackles in the game and not kick goals. So
can you run 15 kilometres? And
well, I can, yeah, but if you don't have to catch anyone, it's easy.
Well, it's amazing these highly paid professional people paid to select players pick him each week. Then it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, so
Big Man has a new favourite player.
Well, it's just let's not let Spargo be the whipping boy, because people are still obsessed with 1995 stats of disposal and goals, because it's just not his metrics. So it's like he's got a clear role, and he's obviously meeting the requirements of his role. So
his other problem is he's too short for the forward line, particularly when we've only got one tall. He was caught out badly by the Lizard this week, and he was caught out badly by Sicily as well. He's just not tall enough to be that extra in defence. Sorry,
now you're being
forward line.
heightist.
Yeah. Anyhow, so so leave him as the maybe. I don't think you need to bring JVR back in this week, even though he kicked, what was it, 4 goals in the reserve, and I'd also like to see AJ stay in the team a bit more. The Saints are not a real challenge to us. We'll talk more about that. They've lost 6 of their last 7 games, so. Yeah, I think we've got more than enough to cover them, particularly the way we're playing and the way that they're not. The game against the Suns was horrible by any measure. I think in one quarter, I think it was the Suns kicked 1 goal and the Saints kicked 2 points. So we're seeing the Abros line of old coming out again. So we're playing a completely different game to that sort of style. It may not look pretty for a while, but we'll eventually break them open.
Big Man changes.
Well, it is a worry. I have real concerns. Viney now 3 weeks. That's like you just hope. I mean, with all that we know, with Gus and all of the other players, with now McGovern, and it's awful to think of the impact that it could have. So. Off what looked at not that pretty innocuous, innocuous. He looked like he got hit, obviously, but you know what I mean. He was up and about straight away. But if he's available, he comes straight back in, doesn't he? So someone's got to come out. I don't think Lever will come out. Well, I don't know. Obviously, if it's injuries worse than good, he said. Sometimes they don't tell the full truth, don't they? But let's assume he's fine. I can only see one change, and that's Viney in and. Sharp is the one that probably comes out. I mean, I don't think Spargo's going to get dropped, although there's a strong argument to say that there's an interesting conversation about Rivers playing his best footy right at the moment with no Viney, and that if Viney comes back in, does he take minutes away from Rivers as a midfield? In which case, I think a really good argument could be made to drop Spargo and replace him directly with Viney, and Viney play that pressure forward role, and but he won't get many numbers, and people will be going, Viney's not playing well. So I wonder whether it would be stiff on Sharp to get dropped. I thought he was great when he came on, and his running power. We really need that running power. So
if he can come on and kick 2 goals. I mean, that's what you want.
And take a good grab and run hard. And as George noted, about AJ, he brings a real energy and spark as well, Sharp. I really liked what he brings to the table. So, maybe the logical one is Spargo out. But, that role that he plays, and the same with Nibbler when he was basically pioneering that high half forward role that everyone pretended didn't exist, and now everyone talks about it week in, week out, how important the high half forwards are, is that you have to subsume your whole way of playing to the team role and be okay with getting criticised for not getting disposals, getting okay with, doing the defensive running when the ball never gets to you. And I don't think it's as easy as plug and play and Viney coming in and knowing how to play that role. So, I don't think it's easy as a like for like, but Viney comes in, I'm not sure. What do you reckon, Andy? Who comes out?
Well, if Viney's coming in, then it's either Spargo or Sharp. It's a hard call to make, but that's a sign of.
Unless they manage, maybe maybe it's time to manage a Claz or then you could look to do that that wouldn't be such a crazy thing, to manage Claz, doesn't travel.
I'm not a huge managing kind of guy.
Well, it is a
So I
critical
to play your best.
game,
But
isn't
yeah,
it?
it
But,
obviously is. Yeah. All right, let's get into the preview. The Saints and the Demons have experienced contrasting seasons today. While the Saints burst out of the block early and Melbourne stumbled through a winless first month. But since then, the tide has turned. Melbourne has won 5 of the last 6 games, while the Saints have dropped. I had down here 5 of the past 6, but apparently it's 6 of the last 7. It's even worse. The Demons are now a game clear of the Saints on the ladder, and both teams will be keen to win to keep their top 8 aspirations alive. And this marks just the second time in their 221-game history that these two sides will meet in Alice Springs. The previous encounter came during the COVID-interrupted 2020 season when a late and controversial goal by Christian Petrarca sealed a narrow 3-point win for the Demons. Bin Man, followed by George, your preview for this all-important match for both teams.
It is a really important match for us to, if we win this, roll into Collingwood, the club will be absolutely desperate for that to be for. Is it our? It's our home game, isn't it?
It's our home game this year.
Yeah, so it's a massive big, really important. I heard we're 20,000 down on membership or some. Such
no, no surprise.
This is massive then for their coffers. So it's a huge game. George is right. I mean, Saints, it's hard. Just be hard work being a Saints fan. I'm just looking at like their numbers in terms of their rankings. In the basic rankings on FootyWire, they've only got 4 high rankings: 4th in tackles per game, 5th in least opponent handballs per game. Where useless stat that one is. 2nd in least opponent clangers per game, and 2nd in team to opponent clangers per game. And that's it in terms of their high ranking. And they've got 17th in hitouts per game, 13th in inside 50s per game. So that really points to last year. What they were doing well was transitioning fast from the half-back flank. They've completely lost that ability to move the ball from the back half, except in 1 or 2 games this season. But otherwise, they've been super dour. The 17th in team hitouts. So, Maxi obviously, and that's even with Marshall playing. My worry about this game, to be honest, is that the 5th in stoppage clearances, 4th in, so they're 2nd in opponent metres per game. My worry is the approach Lyon will take, and I suspect Lyon will try to turn this into just a dour flood back, get numbers behind the ball, basically try to strangle the life out of it, which is hard to get up against and play against. So I suspect that's what's going to happen. They'll look to take away our ball movement. We don't want it to become an arm wrestle and just a contested territory slog. I think really important will be to take our chances. That ground, apparently a fair bit of rain fell. And remember against, was it the Giants, wasn't it?
GWS, yep.
Yeah, it was water, or was it another game where
it had been raining a lot, but it wasn't just that, it was cold as well. It had unseasonable or 100-year cold.
Well, I was thinking actually even last year, wasn't the Giants last year, was it? Giants was 23.
No, last year was, you don't want to remember the game from last year.
That was Fremantle.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So hopefully the weather's going to be all right, because I think, to be honest, I think what's going to be really important, and makes me scared just to say it, is that we take our chances early on and take the game away from them, because Lyon will coach this to, if he can, a 0-0 draw. And that's how I expect the game to go. It's crucial for the Saints to win, and I think the only way they can win it is to play that way. If they try to play a shootout match against us, I think we'll roll over the top of them and win handsomely. If they play an arm wrestle, if they're in it at 3/4 time, who knows? So it's got danger game written all over it, this game.
That's why we've got to kick straight.
That's
George.
Yeah, that's basically it. I think Lyon can only coach us one way in any case. It's trying to stifle the opposition to the nth degree. Their kicking was as bad as ours last week. They kicked 8 goals, 13 or something ridiculous. But the trouble was, as I said, I think it was in the 2nd or 3rd quarter, they only kicked 1 goal 6 or something ridiculous. So
they're playing a pretty bloody uninspiring brand of footy too.
And you're not going to get high scores with the way that Lyon plays. That's the way he's always coached these sort of sides. Nasiah Wanganeen Miller is obviously their best player and the one that you need to keep an eye on. Do not let him run freely at all. He's their version of Kozzy. They've got some reasonable grunt players in the middle in Steele and Sinclair that they're using in the middle a lot more. And Marshall always provides. Marshall's actually improving progressively each season as a ruck. Takes some really good, strong contested marks around the ground as well as rucking well. So Max will have his job cut out with him, but they haven't got a strong forward line. They depend on these opportunists like Owens and that to kick their goals.
It's just ironic seeing they've got what's his name, the fellow who plays for Collingwood now, who's
Membry,
who's best is in there starting 22 week in, week out, and they're arguably one of the top 4 teams around at the moment. He couldn't get, St Kilda gave him away.
Yeah.
So the other thing about St Kilda, just as by the by, only 13,000 people turned up for that game the other day. That's people give Melbourne a whack for our crowds. Unfairly,
no one says boo. They gloss over it.
If you get commented on it was funny because Hardwick, it was a great sledge. He was asked about that stupid comment by Lyon about the Suns being nepo babies. And Hardwick clapped back with, well, you should just worry about getting your house in order and getting more than 13,000 people to a game of footy.
There was the Richmond in him coming out.
Yeah, there was a Richmond in him. And to that ground, he hates that ground.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there for tonight. We'll be back next week to break down our round, round 12 match against the Saints in Alice Springs. If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. And I forgot to mention, we do have a special guest, and no one's probably listening to the outro now. We've got a special guest next week, Jeff White. He's going to join us on the show. I've got to speak to him just to arrange it all. And we'll have a chat to him about his I don't know. We'll find out if it's his company, what's involved in it. First Use, check it out on YouTube. He does a great breakdown of a lot of the ruck jewels, and we'll ask him all about it.
And did a particularly great one. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Breakdown, half an hour. It's fantastic of some of the structures and the way that we basically the way that we beat with a focus on the last quarter, the way we pulled apart Brisbane. Really excellent, really terrific, and well worth watching. So that's something. I can't wait for that. Andy, good get, mate.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to Sarah the Jackal, and thank you to our caller, Redlegs23. Another fantastic call. And your questions and comments, they form an integral part of this show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Spirit of Norm Smith, Go Lordy, D-Rev, MPC, Monocular, Leave It to Diva, Scroll, Lazy, D-Minion, Rostar, Jane02, Smurf, Mandalorian, Doug Reamer, Stu, Ross Millen, Wells 11, Witch's Hat, Delightful Play, Ruse 2, Red and Bluebeard, Go D's and Singer. And thank you to my co-hosts, George and Bigman. Wonderful job as always. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it out and give you a shout out on the show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.
Come on, Demons. Come on.